Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are here on YouTube, you can actually get to the conversation by traveling through Zoom with the link below. And then there you can travel through Zoom to Mukana with the link below, and you can get into the conversation, ask questions. Questions are really important. They run the show. So if you're here as an attendee, you are the producer of the show. It's important that you ask questions. It's also important that you vote on them. We run out of time at the bottom of the hours, and we rush through those questions, and that's because you didn't vote on them. So you didn't push them up. That's your responsibility. Our responsibility is to talk about them. If you'd like to share that responsibility with us, what you need to do is get here a little early, 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that'll give us time to make sure that you've got good internet, good video, good audio. And so we do the mic checks at 6:40. Be here by then. We also hand out the Discord link at that point. And then if you're not sure if you're ready for it, you can get here as early as 6 o'clock, and we kind of have a roaming conversation at 6. But you can come in and do tech checks, and we'll talk about your. Just know that we're a blunt crew. So if you come up here and say, "How am I doing?" We're not going to go, "Hey, you're doing great." That's not really. This isn't the place for participation awards. just so you know, like, this is the place where we have a term called ruthless review, and we mean it. So if you show us something and ask, "What do you think?" you'll get a pretty unvarnished opinion. So first hour is questions and answers. Anything you want to ask about media production, virtual production, visual effects, whatever you want to do in that area. Second hour is something special we've decided to talk about. And so that's today's education, which is really fun. You'll see the whole panel shift into with all these educators and administrators and everything else jumping on. It's really a lot of fun. But the second hour, if you have a second hour question, make sure to tag it. What you do is you ask the question. Then as soon as you posted it, you can tag it as a second hour question. That makes it a lot easier for us to know how many questions we have left. And also it makes it easier for us to just see what's going on down there. So, in our Q&A back end. So definitely tag those as second questions. And speaking of questions, Bill, go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. First question today comes from Doug Ferguson of Fort Wayne, Indiana, who says, does the number of attendees on a Zoom webinar affect the performance of the software client? Doug's on the panel here somewhere.
It can if your processor isn't fast enough to display all those things. So you'll see some processors won't let you go to 49 rooms, for instance, 49 people in one window. But after the 49 or 25, if you don't have the CPU power, hundreds doesn't really matter from your client perspective. Go ahead, Doug.
Well, I was actually running a webinar, and I had two computers as host and co-host. So I was kind of cutting between those two and managing. We had about 850 attendees and only 4 panelists. And I was noticing on both computers, if I would go to click on the chat or the Q&A, like both computers struggled to operate, and it took the software struggled, and I could tell that it was definitely functioning differently. And I noticed it on both computers, so I'm thinking, all right, maybe one computer was less than the other, but that's.
And what were you trying to do? What was the interface? What were you doing that was slow?
Well, I was just trying to manage the 850 like chat things going on, and so I was trying to answer chat, and when I would click in between like my panelist window to the chat window to the question and answer window, I noticed the client software just wasn't functioning. It took it a second to change something.
Mac or PC?
PC.
And how beefy is it? i7, i5, i9?
Both of them are i7s, and one of them is actually a pretty beefy computer with like 32 megs of RAM. Pretty strong computer. So I just wondered if the number of attendees kind of caused that problem.
It shouldn't. It shouldn't have an effect on that. And I have my computer is. We've had events that have over 1,000 people. And definitely lots of events that are nearly 1,000 people, and we haven't had any effect on our performance. So that's because the client doesn't really care. I mean, it's just data after. I mean, it's a small amount of data. I don't know. Has anyone else seen that where they get to a higher number? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I was just gonna, it's a supposition on my part. I've not seen it because, as you know, I have a inordinately beefy computer handling my Zoom sessions when I do it. But
Right.
the reality is I bet you it's if the Q&A and the chat was busy, I bet you it's busy trying to context switch when you switch away from the video to deal with those things.
Were the windows over top of the were the windows all just over top of desktop? They weren't over top of the video.
Like on one of the computers, I had two screens. So I had the,
Yeah.
the one screen with all the panelists, and then on this second screen is where I managed all the Q&A, the chat,
Right.
and then, trying to cut the show on
Yeah.
another one. But it was weird when I would try to spotlight or unspotlight. I just noticed the performance of the software just became noticeably like it took, after I clicked, it took like a couple beats for it to actually take. And, it just something to ask about.
I would install, iStat or something like that, just to,
Yeah.
or the analog on a PC to figure out where it's spending its time.
Yeah.
You might be
Yeah.
surprised.
It could be, and first thing to do when a PC, when anything is feeling like it's leveraged, is make sure you don't have Chrome open. Chris,
Doug, you said it took a beat for it to take. Do you mean like anything you hit a button and it's just sluggish, or do you mean I'm gonna pick this person and I'm gonna spotlight them and then 3, 2, click, and then they spotlight? Are you talking about actually selecting people and views?
Right. That's like when I would click spotlight a person, it would take a beat for that to actually happen.
And you only had 4 panelists,
right.
but
So that's
800 people watching.
Right. And so to me, it was like, and then it happened on the other computer too, because
It is curious.
Co-hosts, you can cut the show on either computer. So no matter where I was sitting that night, because I would swing back and forth, more of my show.
But that function's not at the client level, the spotlight function.
Yeah.
Right. That's so it was just an
Good.
unusual
Guy.
part of it.
Yeah, this is where it's nice to throw an instance up in the cloud because you can see what data center you're connected to. So you might want to try pinging somebody else who you can trust that can pop in as a co-host and then check what data center they're at, because you can check under stats which one you're connected to. And so sometimes there might be some kind of network bandwidth issue. It sounds more like a network thing than anything, because webinar can go 10,000. There's webinar 10,000, which is 10 Gs a month, or 9,000 something. So it's meant to handle way more than 800. And I've been on like the Zoom Academy, they had way more than 800, and it seemed fluid. But anytime if you want to ping some of us and ask for help in Discord, I'd be more than happy to help you with that.
Sure, appreciate it.
Yep. John, and then Roscoe, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you had recently rebooted those systems. You may have already said that and I missed it, but if you had those...
both, everything was freshly.
Yep.
Okay.
Roscoe?
I was going to say, I would definitely check on the bandwidth. I literally cannot refresh the gallery. I'm still missing Jeffrey Powers and Paul Terry Walls on my gallery because I'm on tethered to an iPhone, very limited bandwidth today.
What?
Yep. Next question.
Moving on, Doug Ferguson, 10 minutes after he asked that first question, asked this one, which I think is going to be fun. How do you manage internally when a show does not go as planned?
And Doug, do you mean late after the show or while it's not working?
Do we have time to share my story?
Sure.
So last night I had a doubleheader basketball game, and Lana and I take all day long to set up for it. And then, so one particular problem that was probably the roughest one to get through was we get clock data from a little box, and it gives us the score, the clocks, and timeouts and such. So that was working perfectly all day. And I watched stuff change as the players were warming up and they were doing things. The minute the show started, something happened with the clock. And so, and I don't have an EIC traditionally because I wear like 5 hats during our shows. So the clock was wrong. Like they would stop the clock and then our clock kept going. So our score bug was wrong.
Right.
And I literally had to leave directing, run out through the basketball all the way to the score table to see if somebody had unplugged us from the scoreboard or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm literally running back to the truck, and then it was still wrong. So I had to call tech support, and of course leave a message because it's after hours, and then wait for them to call back. And my wife was running graphics, Lana. She, God love her, she doesn't know how to build them or change something. She can run them. And so the replay operator had to take over directing. And then it came time for a commercial. He did not know how to go to a commercial. So I'm literally on the phone with tech support.
Right.
And the commercial happened. So I had to like, hang on a second. And I had to go run a commercial and then go back and check. And the box had reset and it went into demo mode. So it was sending demo data out. And finally we did sort it out.
What was it?
Well, I'm not 100% sure, but either the clock reset internally and then that killed our software, and then the software just went into demo mode. But after I put our port bot number in, then the software reset and then it started sending correct data. It was a strange error, but me as the director, like that moment took me an insane amount of time to calm back down to then run the show.
Right.
And there were a couple other problems, but it's just, I don't,
Well,
I share that with you guys because I trust you guys and I want you to learn from me that that was a hard thing to get through as somebody running a show, that I needed to focus back down to directing and like let all that go. But it was a struggle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's muscle. It's a muscle to build. Like the couple things. Number one is doing rehearsals with the client or with other people and showing them working is what we call a CYA. So you telling them that you did all that testing won't mean as much as you actually doing testing when they're conscious to it. Hey, we've got to test the clock. We'll test the connection. We're going to make sure that it all works. And I don't know, you may have done that, but doing that with the client or doing it with someone else that's responsible there means that when people start looking for people to throw under the bus later, it was like, well, it was working. But you can't just say, well, it was working. Having them see it work and having people see that there means that they have confidence that you did due diligence and things happen. That's there are the things that are out of your control always, but you just want to make sure that it's visible. Number two is, if you're going to be, we've definitely gone short crew before. Everybody needs to know all the key aspects of how to do it. And you have to sit there and train them and how to do those. If you're going to be, you can't, if you're going to be the only person that knows how to do those things, then you can't leave the bus. Like you can't leave the train or the trailer. You need to be, you can't move if that's the case. And so then you have to have someone you can trust to go out and DX that. But you have to cross train. We cross train all the time. So we would, on smaller events, we would trade people around so that people are learning how to do those things. And in rehearsals, we're training them until we feel like they're good enough to do it. And then we have them do it in areas that, like near the end of the show, and not for big shows, but for little shows, we have them start doing pieces of it. And for smaller shows that people don't have quite the budget for the more advanced crew. But cross training people is super important, because otherwise it can be a whole bunch of things. We've had TDs get sick, in the show, and somebody else has to just step up and start cutting, and usually on my crew, there's 2 or 3 people that are capable of sitting in front of a switcher and cutting, and so you need to have the cross. If you're going to go small, you need to cross train. And then if you're not going to cross train, then you need really enough people, and one of the things that I've done a lot of is, I train people. Training is a piece of what I've done for a long time now. We're all talking here and having a conversation and learning together. Before COVID, I would be constantly working with Local 16, which is the local union, with colleges, with high schools. And what I'm doing is I'm building up a group, and to the same degree I'm doing a little here, building up a group of people that I can trust, group of people that know what they need to know, and that I can identify them, when I need them. And in a local environment, when you're doing those shows, a lot of times you can get folks that are learning, and you pay them, not what you'd pay a regular TD, but you pay them enough to, it's an extra person, it's a little bit of an extra cost. But now you have a couple extra hands, and you have to, basically when you're just crewing without that, you're a hunter gatherer. When you are training people and interacting with your overall community, you're a farmer. And we got to this size by farming, not by hunting gathering, and so you have to really think about how you're going to nurture your community, to build, what you need in the future before you need it. And so that's just something to think about. And I can tell you that I can train high school students to do video production very fast. I don't know if I can do it on a TriCaster, but on Blackmagic hardware, I can do it in 3 hours. Like that'll do a reasonably good job of what they're doing. On the hardware that I use, I can sit down. It's simple enough. We keep the show simple enough, and in about 3 hours, I can take someone who has never done it before that's reasonably smart and focused, and get them up to speed. And so it's anyway, it doesn't mean that I can't be there. I have to be there and fix things. But I would argue that you really want to get to a point where you are not doing, like in the event that I'm working on right now, I'm not doing much of anything. I'm fixing things, I'm talking to everybody, and I'm organizing things, and I'm picking at things and trying to figure out how to fix things, but my hands are not on very many things, and you need somebody who's floating, to solve those. When you don't have anybody floating, you have exactly the problem that you have, which is a pin got pulled out, and now everything you have this, what you're talking about is a classic example of a cascading failure, where it's one thing that goes wrong that isn't that big of a deal that starts unwinding everything else. We were talking about in the pre-show, someone cut a fiber and half of Facebook went down because of a cascading failure, and that's those are the kind of things you have to be careful of. Go ahead, Sky.
Doug, I applaud you for being a theater person. The show must go on. And so you make choices, and they're not what you had anticipated or expected, but you continued. So congratulations, well done. Now, I also applaud you because you're reverse engineering. You're looking at your technical, you're looking at your redundancies, and so you're trying to make it better for the next time. Okay,
go ahead, real quick.
Well, the third thing is, I called my company Embrace the Journey for a reason, because you don't know what the past, you know what the past was, and you have no idea what the future is, but you just embrace the moment. So there you go.
The Marines have another term for that. It's called embrace the suck. And so
we modified it for that. Yeah, based exactly on that. Yes.
Yeah, but the thing is that my uncle used to work for Ted Turner, and Ted Turner, no matter where he was anywhere in the world, would have a helicopter show up, and some guy would walk out with a pad of paper. I've told this story before, but would walk out with a pad of paper with a bunch of things that ran CNN and ran, all the Turner companies. 6 lines of I believe it was 6 lines of text and yes or no, big yes nos, nothing else. There was no explanation. There was no nothing. It was just yes, no. And he would go through 30, 40 decisions in a couple minutes. Like just look at it and just go, yes, no, yes, no. He wouldn't talk to them about why or whatever. He would just approve it or not approve it, hand it back, and the person would leave. And someone asked him one time, and he's notorious, Ted Turner's notorious. They used to say it was like as if he had a steel wall in the back of his head for the past. Like he just didn't want, you wouldn't, if you started talking about what we coulda, shoulda, woulda with him, you wouldn't work for him for very long. Like he just didn't care. And someone asked him, you're making those decisions so quickly and you have so little information. What happens if you make a wrong decision? And he said, well, tomorrow I'll make another one. Like it was just, and that is, it's, and the thing to think about is it is a muscle that you have to build to not look back and do that. I got to work A2 for an NFL game, and I was expecting to hear all the good stuff, right? Because I was working with someone who puts the mics on the pads, and it's all the blue 42. That's all there's a whole team that just does that piece, right? And they use Zaxcom, and they get it all set up, and they, but so you get to hear the huddles, all the huddles, right? And the funny thing was is that I thought we were going to hear all the good stuff and them complaining and everything else. Almost never. Timeouts, you hear a little bit of it. Almost anything that happens on the field, when they get back to the huddle, it's the next play. And it's just next play, and and there's no discussion, there's no process, there's no nothing, because they don't have time. They got 25 seconds. But I'm clear that also that players that get into that shenanigans of talking during huddle just don't make it to the NFL. You have to build that. They built that muscle that they're just going to forget the last play and go into the next play. And so I think that I've thought about that a lot since I did that job, where sometimes I get into the situation that you're in, Doug, where things went wrong, and I have to, in my head, I have to internally just say, okay, next play. I got to reset and move on. It's hard, and it's a muscle. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Go ahead, Chris.
To be clear, in the NFL, there's a whole bunch of coaches on the side that are watching everything. They're even, shooting it all, and they're going to discuss it later. But the players at that moment don't have to. And I think the difficulty in Doug's place is he's the coach and the quarterback.
It's hard.
I think the other thing to think about, Doug,
and the running back. And the receiver.
And everything. Yeah. The other thing to think about is, to avoid the cascading failures, is sometimes the very best thing to do is to just say, there's not going to be a clock in this game. Because if you don't have the personnel to troubleshoot it, and you have to walk away, which is tough. We've all been on the bare bones crew. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what? We're just going to the wide shot. We're going to do that until this is solved. And it'll be an artistic choice, and nobody at home in their living room is going to understand why.
Well, the good thing was we did have a second game to redeem ourselves, which was better. But I do take a hero, and I record the truck.
There's your coach
and I
cam.
Record the comms, and so I will go back and review, but it's hard not to beat myself up. Especially like when I spent an hour building a graphic and then I don't use the graphic. That happened like 3 times last night, and I was just like,
you should only beat yourself up if you're not doing the review and later you repeat yourself.
Just you just want to make new mistakes. All right, next question.
Moving on to one from Sky Gleason here in the panel. Any tips or tricks for using FiLMIC Pro? One use is the third live Zoom camera going HDMI cable into ATEM. Any gotchas? Is it third live, lower third live? Sky,
just another camera. Just another camera, right? Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I use it as an over-the-shoulder camera for my shots here. And one thing I've noticed is that sometimes the power cord works itself undone. So always double check your power cords. And the other thing I've noticed is occasionally after being up for a while, the application will crash out. That happens with any application. So you just double check your application's running before you rely on it.
I'm pretty happy with these cables that I've started to use. This is a USB-A cable and a separate lightning, just a 6-foot cable, and then that goes into HDMI. Now you do need to plug it in and power it. The USB also powers this connector, so you have to have power to run it. But I got it on Amazon or something, but it's like two wires that go in. And I've been testing that with the iPhones. I've got a bunch of them now that are working. It's just nice because it doesn't have that adapter at the end of the camera. It is just a cable, a little thin cable that goes into it that has worked really well. And then the other thing is make sure to lock it into 16 by, get it to landscape and then lock its aspect ratio, because it gets into this weird thing where it thinks you're 9 by 16. We saw that when I was showing it the other day, and then you turn it and it stays there. And so, getting that done too. And then now that I know how to use the remote is really useful. Go ahead, Greg.
I so needed to learn that from, I'll call Tony, but also it would blink out last night. And yes, John, I did use it for the Skycam, oddly enough. And so it was hanging off of a C-stand looking down onto the food.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I would say that if the picture you're getting from the regular iPhone without FiLMIC Pro is good, you don't need FiLMIC Pro. It's just it's just the camera control, and it's another point of failure. You know what I mean?
I get the full interface when I use it So I get
Well,
the
yeah, I
all that.
know, but it's what I'm saying is it's another point of failure. And if your phone looks okay by itself,
But the phone
what's the
doesn't do a
point?
clean out because the
No,
phone
the
doesn't
phone
do a
doesn't
clean
do a
out.
clean out. That's the
Oh,
issue.
It doesn't do a
okay.
clean out of the HDMI.
There's
Okay.
And so, and then the other thing is that the fiLMIC will let you lock all your exposures and color and everything else. You can do a lot more to it. And so, if you're trying to sync cameras or you're trying to sync your
Yeah.
fiLMIC, your iPhone to another one, and I have to admit, after playing with it, I mean, I'm still working through some of the details, but I do think that the iPhone, especially for an overhead camera, is really nice because it's really small and light,
Yeah.
and it's easy, and and that little remote lets you do a little bit of work. So I couldn't believe how close I could get. I was,
You're
even
zooming,
with the current
you're
camera,
zooming in as well with the remote.
you can, yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
so need to learn that.
Yes, it's nifty. So anyway, I do wish it would zoom in and then pan scan. You could zoom in and pan scan. That would be cool. Anyway, next question.
Guy from the panel, Guy Cochran, has a couple of really cool questions next. He wants to look at some of the live things that are happening around us right now. So Jeffrey Powers, can you bring us up to speed on news from CES? And then he wants to look at NAM next. So CES first.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, I'll show three things really quick. First of all, there we are. Razer's come out with a N95 style mask that's kind of see-through, and it does have some sort of processing in it. I don't know how well it's going to work, but they're gearing it towards not only gamers but also broadcasters.
Is it Bluetooth?
I don't know. I'm supposed to be interviewing them next week. CES is going to actually.
How much are they?
CES is. I don't know yet. Yet.
Everything's
So, and I
better
don't
with
think they put
Bluetooth.
out a price. But that's one thing.
I just want to make sure that there's a sound effect. It's got to have a little speaker, and when I put it on, it has to go. It'll be great. Anyway, go ahead,
Everybody
Jeffrey.
does sound like Bane, don't you?
Bane,
Yeah, go
Bane.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Okay, so that's one thing. Another one, I interviewed this guy. This guy, he made a light for a 360 camera that goes underneath. That is called the CL360. He's looking for people to help him with distribute this out and manufacture it. So this is still in production. And then the third one was, we've talked about this one before, Crew in a Box, which is an all-encompassing set down, set up type situation.
Did you get their business model? Did they tell you how much they're charging for that?
Yes, there's two prices. There's the outright price of the box, which is somewhere around the $39,000 mark. And it has a black magic, and it has a bonded cellular, and it has some specific coding in it that they've done. And then you can rent it out. It's like $5,000 a day. You can get white glove service, so they'll find somebody to set it up for you and tear it down for you from there. So.
That
And
makes
then
me
one
feel
more
better
thing.
because I saw
Yeah.
it. I just built a bunch of kits that are the same thing, but mine were less than half of that. So I was like, I saw it when it came out. I was like, should I have done that? And at that rental rate, it would have been disastrous for me. So
Yeah.
okay.
And then one more, and that's Samsung. They showed it during their keynote. They haven't really taken too many interviews, but they showed their robot with the single arm. They also showed another robot that came up to the table, brought the screen up, and pulled it in to whatever conferencing software you had. So that's going to be interesting to see. As for NAM, I've got scheduled stuff, lots of stuff for next week. Lots of software. Audio Technica is one of them that is announcing a couple new things. So if anybody sees anything that they want more information on, let me know.
Did you go to Showstoppers?
Showstoppers was more of, they were going to talk and I'm going to listen. So I saw a few of them, but there was not much participation. It was Pepcom that was the one I had a lot of
how did that work?
Information from. They are using a event software, and I can't remember, on 24 or on 32 or something like that.
On 24.
And
did that really work?
I don't know. Anyway, so it's just a bunch of boxes you call up, and it comes to a virtual booth, and then there's you can do a Teams or a Zoom session. I did interviews from there, so it was okay. There was also a new one called TechFluence, and they use that same software, so that worked okay. But it is what it is.
Yeah. The thing that On 24 was notorious for is really low video quality. You were like, they don't really care about video. Anyway, Chris.
This is a little weird. I just want to point this out quickly. Alex, you just said the sentence, did you go to Showstoppers? And if you think about the early days of the internet, people would say, check us out at www. Or then it evolved into visit us at. But you just said, did you go to? Like it was a physical thing, like it was a place to go, it was a thing to do. I think there's a shift that has literally just happened in front of me. Maybe somebody else has seen it. Did you go to?
Did you virtually go to something? Yeah,
exactly.
Did you go to
No, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Out of CES, Chris, there's side shows, and one of the side shows is PepCom, and the other side show is Showstoppers. And anybody that's done press has known of these shows, so that's probably why.
Yeah,
Alex
you think about going to them.
I was just talking about the particularly specific use of the verb to go.
I still think, I strongly believe that at some point in the near future, people are going to realize that their ROI would be much higher if they just had a company studio to show off things and bring people in mass and show people how and do Q&A. Like they have this whole thing, like they have to build up a big show and they have to have graphics and that would be nice. But literally for most of these groups, just having experts, in the, talking, about their product and giving them the proper AV tools to do it well, that's usually enough, and if you did that regularly, then, and you let a bunch of big groups, and then you can, from there, if there's people asking a lot of questions or there's certain people, you use that same studio to have a meeting with Jeffrey or to have a meeting with me or to have a meeting with someone else. But it looks great and sounds great instead of this weird webcam solution. Anyway, next question. Oh, go
Moving
ahead, Guy.
on, TJ.
You're gonna say Guy before
we didn't get to really look at that schedule, which is what I thought a lot of us would find interesting. Some of them so this is a week long of NAMM events, and thanks to Abe Mitchells for sharing this with me through Messenger. There's things like introducing Dante AV video for the Dante solution. So we talk a lot about Dante audio.
And what are they doing? And what platform is this? Are they using?
I have no idea. That's why I was like, and this is a lot. This is a week. This is an entire week's worth of show. So, and each day is packed.
They're supposed to be stretching it out for 10 weeks. And CES is supposed to go till February 15th, technically.
Right. Well, that's good. And,
so
and
teaching
by the way,
in a virtual.
I will argue that is the beginning, right? Where they're starting to stretch it out. And I think that they're starting to realize that they're no longer constrained by time and space. That they are, we could do this for 8 weeks, or we can do that. We can stretch this out. We don't have to do it all in one time. And I think that you're starting to see those are cracks, cracks in the process where once the water starts going through those cracks, you can't put it back in. Jeffrey and then Victor and then Sky.
CES has already announced that next year they're going to do 3 days virtual, and then they're planning to be in Vegas unless things change.
There you go, Victor.
Yeah, I'll be going to the NAMM stuff too. And my entrance to that, oddly enough, came from me having completed my first level on Audionate for Dante, and that got me the entrance. And so I'll be doing level 2 training while in one of those sessions, any certification. So that's kind of nice.
That's great. Yeah,
I'm just curious. I mean, these are what used to be tentpole events specific to a time of year in history, but now as we spread them out, I mean, we have had libraries before that nobody went into. We have the internet that people didn't know how to search. We had Creative Live created that concept of learning as you wanted to and pulling rather than pushing. So I don't disagree with you, Alex. I absolutely agree with you, actually. I'm just curious, as a species, how are we going to always want something new, and how are we going to make it relevant over time versus in a moment?
Well, I think that the main thing is that, I mean, you look at what we're doing here, and we're having more and more folks come on to the show. So we're going to have, the founder of QLab, or one of the folks that work group QLab will be on soon, and talking to us about that kind of thing. And again, to get back to it, as we share this group with other people and it gets bigger, it could really get to a point where every day we have a CES level or NAB level event for the second hour, and we don't have to do it all in one push. Now, can a brand do that on their own? I don't know. Like, I think that that's where you need a group like ours, to be the thing that you come to, you jockey for position to be in it, because at this point we're a pretty large user group, that shows up every day, that typically runs about, when you look at the total number of views, unique viewers, not necessarily here all the time, the whole 3 hours or whatever, but it's 400 to 600 people a day, a day, 400, 600 people a day. So it's a pretty, and when that gets to 2,000 or 3,000 a day is when we can pretty much get anybody in our industry to show up, and so then that becomes kind of an ongoing, an ongoing discussion. But to your point, I think it's hard for brands to do that on their own. I think that it's easier for us to do that, and us to be the place that they come, like you would go to a user group or like you would go to a CES. The brands show up at CES, or they show up at NAB. And so I think that's the opportunity, is for them to be part of these kinds of things. Anyway, next question.
Moving on, TJ Asher of Minneapolis is in with, Greg said Chris's compressor was pumping. What does that mean?
Go ahead, Bill.
So it's a process. The idea of a compressor is that it limits dynamic range, which means that it wants to put the entire signal, no matter how quiet or how loud that signal coming in is, into a smaller range of loud to soft. On the loud end, that means it's going to quiet things down, but on the soft end, it means it's going to boost them up. And when you get a compressor that is set too aggressively, you will find that all the quiet things like room noise or hiss or anything else, as soon as you stop speaking, it's going to bring that up to try to achieve its goal of keeping everything inside the range. That means you're going to get a increased hiss, and then the moment you speak or it gets a signal, that hiss is going to go down. That's typically what we refer to as pumping.
And the two handles that create pumping, and Greg can jump in if he wants to, but the two handles that typically create that are your compression rate, your ratio, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 5-to-1, whatever you're going to use, and your threshold. So the threshold is how far down am I going to go where I start to use this compressor and pull things up. So, and what pumping usually happens is that you have a relatively high compressor setting, and that threshold is near where your hero audio is. And so what's happening is it's dropping in and out of it, and you hear that pumping. Go ahead, Greg.
The other thing that can trigger pumping is the release time. If you have a very short release time, it means it releases the compressor too early, and then everything shoots back up, and so you can get into it that way too.
Yeah, we did a bunch of stuff where we used software to control the auto switching within a Hangout, and it was amazing to watch the effect of attack and decay, of when you make those decisions and how you make them. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Consumer gear also often has a circuit called AGC, automatic gain control, and it is the bane of any professional audio person. So there is another way that pumping happens. So there is no noise floor coming up. What that means, real quick, what that means is that anytime that it gets real quiet, it goes looking for sound. It actually boosts up the gain and brings the floor up, and it just drives you nuts.
Yeah. Is that like Auto Iris? Is that like Auto Iris?
Yeah, it's a lot like Auto Iris.
Okay,
absolutely. Yep. Next question.
And it's horrible auditorially. Greg Gibson is up next from Washington, D.C. How do you tell a client in a large multi-day production that all those fantastic changes they want to incorporate an hour before live actually puts the entire production at risk, particularly when it's coming from the CEO in pre-show run-throughs and staffers who want to execute his or her vision?
As the producer, it's your job. Like, don't think that it's their job. They hired you to throw you under the bus. So you got to be the bad person there. You'll want to try to hang on to your job, but you have to be the person that says what needs to be said. Don't put your staff that's talking to that CEO in the position of telling them no. It should be something that at least comes from you in that process. There's two things. This is why you do rehearsals the day before. It happens all the time. People don't know what they need. It's what we would call agile development. People don't know what they need until they see it. So you get a CEO shows up, they start working on something, and it is the most common thing in the world for them to show up a day or two before and want something different because they see something that's missing. We once worked on a show in the Moscone Center where the CMO walked up, did 10 minutes and said, I need the entire stage extended. You know, this stage is too far back. I need you to extend it out like 15 feet. Now that's a change to all the lighting. That's new staging. That's everything. And the show's the next day. And $400,000 got done. Like it was, and so, like it was an amazing, a lot of local 16 guys working a lot of hours. And so, and they flipped the room and changed the structure. And so the earlier you can do that, and the key is trying to get people to look at it early, trying to get them to look at it ahead of time so that you don't end up in those fast turns and you have time to do it, but you don't always get there. It's communicating ahead of time that, hey, this is the last time we can make this change. After this, we really won't be able to, we're locking it down. Do you guys want to look at it? And so there's a lot of these conversations that you have in email that are setting pins that you can go back to that said, hey, we told you that this is when we can do this, and this is when we have to lock it, and then on the day of the event when someone really wants to do it, what there is to tell them is we can give it a shot. But here's the problem is that you'll destabilize the event, and destabilizing the event doesn't mean that the thing that you're asking for will go wrong. It means that anything that happens could go wrong because you're now distracting the team away from what they were going to do a little fire drill. And so when they do that fire drill, your thing that you just asked for might actually work, but something else won't. The audio won't work, or the playbacks won't work, or the edit won't work. And so you basically make sure that they know that you're kind of inoculating yourself from all responsibility if they go down that path. And if they still want to do it, then you do it. And you do everything you can not to have anything go wrong, but you're basically really having very clear conversations about the danger of you're now against sharp knives. And we're warning you not to do this. We highly recommend it. And you list off not just that could go wrong, but that all things could go wrong in an email that says we highly recommend against this. And then, but in the end of the day, if they want to do it, you do it. Like I don't not do it. I just tell them there's a whole lot of emails that go out that go, this is a bad idea. Jeffrey?
So the answer is not no. It is, this is how much it's going to cost.
This is how much it's going to cost. This is the risk that you're taking, so you're identifying the risks, you're identifying the costs, you're identifying what it's going to take to do it. I almost never say no to my client. Like I just, as they make new requests, I will tell them what could go wrong when they go down that path, and I keep pushing for it to keep moving it forward. Chris, and then Peter.
Yeah, Doug and I were having a meeting with a potential client the other day where they started talking about all the stuff they wanted to do. And then we said, so when is this? And they were like, oh, it's going to happen this date. I was like, okay, I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be that guy in the room. But all the stuff you asked for clearly is not going to happen by that day. So, I mean, we could say it is, but it won't. There's too many moving parts. So let's think of the alternatives.
And again, I won't tell them that. I will tell them to do it in that pace will be extraordinarily expensive.
That too.
Yeah, but I was saying we can do. Like I always say, yeah, we can do that. It's just, and I've done it. Like I've told someone needed a satellite truck with a point-to-point into Syria for a conference, and they gave me 48 hours, and I said that'll be $55,000 to pull that off. And they said sure. Like okay, now I got to figure out how to get a sat truck in Turkey. Peter.
Well, I was going to say when I went to work for the IBM company, I learned a couple things even from the laboratory perspective. We had this acronym called RPQ, Request for Price Quotation. So
right.
If some customer wanted some new widget added to our mainframe, engineering lab would go cost it, and then sales would go price it. And it was always fascinating to watch the difference between those two, let alone what they... whether or not the customer would pay for it.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to move on. We're going to go into accelerated mode because we're running out of time. And I have a hard out at 9. Next question.
Moving on to David Brady of New York. In events produced by the panel, generally speaking, who's responsible for run of show? The client, production team, or a combination? And there's a note, any gotchas to be aware of to not get lost in the weeds is appreciated.
I would say that generally for us, it's a conversation. Like we're working with them on the run of show. We're making suggestions. We're talking about, what we think would work. I mean, usually they have an idea of what that is. Sometimes we are more heavy-handed about it. If they have event experience, then we leave it more to them. If they don't, then we take more responsibility to guide that run of show. But that's kind of how we approach it. It's not usually if you know it, it's a conversation. If you're not clear of what the run of show should be, then let them do it. But usually after you do it a couple times, you have some pretty good ideas of what you need. Things to think about are just knowing that you need something to start the show. The most important part of the run of show is how you get in, how you get out, and then all your cues. so like, and it's just when you do transitions, and what you're looking for in a run of show is what's a hard transition versus an easy transition. This is when people are talking is relatively straightforward, but it's getting them off stage, getting them on stage, getting graphics up, getting videos up. And the more cues there are, the more complicated and the more rehearsals, the tighter run of show. Those are the things you have to kind of think through. And so the more detail it's all based on cues. You're getting in and out of cues is the thing that you're looking at in your run of show. And looking at cues that will conflict with each other. If I need to have this person on this side of the stage and then you have one of them on the other side of the stage, I need to know how much time I have to get them through. But again, remember that, as Omar Bradley would say, amateurs talk about strategy and professionals talk about logistics. And so the run of show is your logistic plan, of how you're actually going to get from point A to point Z. Next question.
Laura Seal, our friend from Greensboro, says, what is DOCSIS? Do I need 3.0 or 3.1 and a modem for home use? And what other specs are important?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So DOCSIS is boosting up your internet speed. A DOCSIS 3.0, you have about a 200 megabits per down and up to 1 gigabit up. You should be fine with a DOCSIS 3.0. 3.1 is for faster. If you have full 1 gig down, 1 gig up, then you'll want to be on DOCSIS 3.1. So it's an extended protocol, basically.
Next question.
Moving on to Michael Marsh, who's in with, I'm looking for a low-cost 4K HDR monitor for use in edit and basic color grading. What is an IPS display? I don't need color critical due to price. Just want to be able to calibrate the monitor and then view my work as a client or customer would see it in the real world. Any recommendations?
Number one is I can just tell you there's no way to know how the client's going to see it in the real world. These TVs are all over the place. Go ahead, Sky.
I got one recently. I got it way too big. I thought it was going to be a client monitor. It ended up being my on-camera, my editing monitor. Get something that's comfortable close to you also, so you don't need the 80-inch at your elbow.
Yeah, and definitely if you see Charles Klein on this thing, I would definitely pop him for a question there, because it's and you might be able to find him on Discord, because this is something he deals with a lot. Do think about Blackmagic makes a nice little interface that will let you calibrate the monitor, and it's useful. As far as you do need to calibrate it, you need a piece of hardware that's feeding it so that it can calibrate it properly. So think about that. And sorry, we're going to keep moving because we're running out of time. Go ahead, next question.
Next question comes to us from TJ Asher on the panel from Minneapolis. Temporal compression. I've heard that bandied about here lately. What the heck does it mean? Insert reference to your favorite sci-fi movie here.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
It just means that the frames, as they go through time, are compressed into one frame, and then the only thing we're doing are the changes from the first frame to the following frames. Right. Only the changes are what we're putting into the data stream.
When you think of the size of the GOP, a lot of times it's 60 frames or 200 frames or 30 frames. The GOP is a group of pictures, and it has one frame that is the frame, right? And then it has little P frames and B frames that are keeping track of it, and then it has just all the, and so basically to what Roscoe said, you're only tracking changes in it, and that makes it much more efficient because it doesn't have to keep every whole frame. And so you have spatial compression, which is grouping all the pixels together, and then you have temporal compression, which is grouping the frames together in their changes. And this is why complex backgrounds negatively affect both spatial and temporal compression, and then also things moving, like a whole bunch of things moving means that temporal compression can't work because everything's changing all the time. And in a constant bit rate like Zoom, when it runs out of budget, it runs out of budget. And so then what it has to do is start destroying your either your spatial or temporal or both, or frame rate. And so that's why simple backgrounds that aren't moving will tend to make everything look better and run better because it works inside of that bit rate solution. And we're going to keep moving. Next question.
Okay, moving to Talak Miguel Lopez Waterman, who says, I never see any reflection on Alex's glasses. What methods do the panelists use to get the results like that with the bespectacled talent? Lighting angles, special coating on the glasses, other tricks?
Mine is lighting angle, and I definitely take it into account because I wear glasses. So if I turn up like this, there they are. down like this. So the position of my lights is absolutely affects where that position is. There's two things I'm looking at in my or three things. I want the highlight in my eyes to be in the top half of my eyes, just because it's usually pleasing. I want to cut my jaw out a little bit because I have a little bit of a double chin, and then I don't want to have reflection in in my glasses, and so that probably pushes my lighting probably more than almost anything else. John, real quick, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, one other trick I use is I angle my glasses just slightly. As you can see here, I've re-angled them, and now you can see my light.
Yep.
If I just slightly tweak them slightly, it gives me a little bit more flexibility. And when I remember to do that, I don't have lighting reflection.
But that's also why I tend not to use ring lights the way they were built. You know, I don't put the camera in the ring light. I know it's a look, but I tend to use the ring lights, but I use them up at an angle. So then I just use any, they just are a large source. Next question.
Craig Gibson, Washington, D.C. I had an issue this week where NDI Virtual Camera input would not load. If I installed, it would run, but would not after rebooting. The process was listed in Task Manager. If you killed the process and restarted it, it ran fine. Has anybody run into this? And if so, how did you solve it?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's most likely if you've got other programs, if you got Zoom and Teams on there, that could be taking over, and you might have to either uninstall one or stop it. But you also, if it's on the Mac side, you also have to do a unsign of the app, where then that will fix the problem. That's Mac only.
Go ahead, Guy, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I saw this issue recently, and Jeff Keithley gave some wise words. One of it was to put on the network a NDI Discovery Server, which is a really lightweight app, because what could be happening is there's two things colliding, and that'll just knock one or both of them out. So NDI Discovery Server, and make sure that the machines are uniquely named, because some people will image and they'll have the same exact name, and that'll cause that exact issue. So that especially happens up in the cloud when you're duplicating instances, and that's one way of going around it, NDI Discovery Server.
That's great. Next question.
James Babb of San Diego. For head and shoulders lighting on Zoom, does the Nanlight Limipad 25 or a newer video light with 660 LEDs have more natural looking light?
Go ahead, TJ.
The Nanlight is edge lit, and the light comes through the frosted panel. The newer light has all the LEDs sort of out in an array that you can see directly. As long as you have a covering over the front of that to diffuse the LED, I think either will work just great.
Yep. And the NAND lights are what we use as a standard for our systems at this point. We use a couple of them usually. Bill, real quick.
Yeah, really quickly, if you do use an LED array, just understand that barn doors and things like that become pretty useless, because if you try to cut them, each one of those little LEDs is its own mini spotlight. So they don't work like a single tungsten fixture or even a cob fixture with a single light source. So just know that.
The great thing about the barn doors is making your diffusion much larger. So a lot of times we open up the barn doors pretty far for things that have barn doors, and then we put our diffusion over top of it, and it creates a nice giant source that we can use. Next question.
Hector Rodriguez of Springfield, Virginia says, for your ISO Zoom computers, do you use one or two devices to get video in or out? And if so, what is that device?
For the ones we're using right now, we're using DisplayPort to HDMI cables into a Blackmagic HDMI to SDI, and then feeding that into our router. So it's two, but they're little. They're like $50 each, and they just convert that out. And the main reason is that we have expensive cards, Duos and 8K cards in them that we can't use because Zoom can't see the Blackmagic card out. It can see it on the way in, just can't see it on the way out. So anyway, so hopefully that'll change. But right now, that's how we do it, and it works pretty well. Next question.
Paul Edison Lamb says, and he must be watching us on Mukana at the same time he's listening otherwise, the video feed in Mukana is delayed by many seconds, or is it just me? How many people watch the video in Mukana as opposed to Zoom or on YouTube?
I don't know exactly how many people watch it. I'm guessing from feedback, probably 20-25 people are on Mukana only. It is delayed because YouTube's delayed. So it is delayed by 12 seconds. It should be longer than this. Yeah, YouTube. It's because we're just embedding a YouTube link into it. If there got to be a point where we could embed a Zoom link into it, it might work better, where we could just put, have a Zoom window pushed into there in real time, but that doesn't exist yet. Next question.
And it comes from Ernest Floyd, our last regular question of the day from Bastrop, Louisiana. I have a new M1 Mac. Google Drive Stream currently does not work with the M1. Any suggestions on the best app to mount Google Drive in the Finder?
I have to admit, I just don't like drives on my computer. I think just so many bad experiences with Dropbox chewing up my entire hard drive that I stopped doing it. So I don't put drives on my computer. So I just don't know. I don't know because I won't do it. I won't mount things that are going to change in size on my computer. So I think we got stumped on that one. I guess not a lot of people are using Google Drive. Drives me a little crazy. So that's the other thing. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to say, that's why I keep an old computer around so that I can get into all those old functions while I'm transitioning to the new one.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, we didn't have a good answer there, but we got stumped there. So if you're an educator and you're in our audience, please raise your hand, and we'll get you in here. When everyone raises their hand, this is that me playing whack-a-mole of oh my gosh. Zoom.
I'm starting on the bottom.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and do it. Okay, I'm gonna step away for just a second. Let's go ahead, Bill, and we'll do some mic checks here when we bring everybody in.
Okay, doke.
Since I don't know all the names for the education panel, if there's somebody that sneaks in that shouldn't be in there, let me know.
I'll open it up. Open up my Paul Prusakowski. Yes. Yeah, good. You got him. Let's see. I have to change this. Test. There we go.
Paul let his hair down today.
We're seeing seeing familiar faces. This feels good to have our educators showing. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Kent. Hi, Tony.
Favorite time of the week.
Oh.
And Daniel, have you been here before? Or I'm not familiar. You haven't? Well, welcome to
user, first time caller.
Nice to have you here. It's always great to see new blood in the panel. I guess while people are being let in, we can start the mic check. So Daniel, since I was just talking to you and you're up, I don't know if you've ever done this before. So I'm going to presume you haven't. So in the panel, you will see a WLM meter.
Hi.
And it's got let's have everybody else mute just temporarily. And we're going to go one at a time through, folks. Your goal is to hit a -24 average. When I say average, that's very important because this meter is averaging about 3 to 5 seconds of speech. So you need to be able to basically continuously speak for that long, and then we'll get the average reading. So you want to go ahead and your mic is open as far as I can tell. So just go ahead and talk at your normal pace for 3 to 5 seconds.
Okay. My name's Daniel Roseman. I'm glad to be here. I am a visual effects veteran and have a school for kids teaching them video game design.
Okay. At the end of that, it sounded like you were pretty close to the right level. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Up at the top of your Zoom screen, does it say turn on original sound or turn off original sound?
Neither.
You're not seeing either of those, so it may not be there. So click on your Zoom picture in there and, oh no, I'm sorry. Go to your Zoom preferences. And then in audio, do you have turn original sound? Whoops, I got too many things showing here.
Take off the automatic.
Yeah.
All right.
Remove automatically, adjust microphone level. Now, do you have control over your Zoom thing? Because you should still have the mic volume slider. So use that and then try to get to 24 on that meter.
Okay. All right, well, this has been interesting to learn about Zoom in this conversation. I see I'm getting pretty
You're pretty low,
high.
so you need to come up a good little bit on your
All
mic
right, it's coming
input.
back on my mic, and now I'll try and keep this kind of pace of talking as I speak during this most interesting session that we're about to have, but we seem to have gone down quite low.
No, you're coming up. You're getting better all the time, so keep doing what you're doing.
I'm at the max volume on my slider right now, and
Okay. Sometimes that happens with low output mics, so I'm going to have you go back to turn off that original sound thing. We normally get better quality, but sometimes you have less gain applied when you're doing it manually rather than automatically.
Okay, so I'm back to automatic mic, and I will try to speak a little bit louder when I'm talking on this call so that I can hit that 24 consistently.
You've made it. You're doing great. So just come in
Really-
about that volume and you're fine. Well
Really
done.
quick, does your headset have have volume buttons for the microphone as well?
No,
Okay.
it does not have.
Okay, you're doing fine. We can hear you clearly, so we're going to call that a success because it is. And then we're moving on to Kara Negri. Go ahead, Kara. Welcome.
Myself. Hold on. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Pressed it too many times. Still getting used to this mute button.
You're a bit loud, so
I-
if you have control, come down a little bit.
Okay, that would be, yep. Okay, that's Paul. He's on it. And it's a beautiful day here in Florida, by the way. If anyone is in the cold, just imagine yourself here in Florida with the sunshine. It is a little cold here, I have to say.
You sound great. Paul's got it nailed, so you're fine. We're going to move on to Aaron Graham. Hi, Aaron, representing the elementary teachers. We always love it when you're in the panel.
Thank you so much. I'm Erin from Boston, where it is raining heavily right now. So all the snow is officially gone, but now we have mud again. Who'd have thunk?
You sound great. That's fine. Kent Kersey, often panelist here.
Hello, how is it going? Hope everyone is doing okay. So I am trying this out, trying to think if I need to go up a little bit. Is
You
that
do. You're a little
correct?
quiet.
Okay, so I'm coming up a little bit.
Stop there and maybe come down just a
and-
tiny little bit, then try
All
the
right.
strength.
Okay, testing 1, 2. And for Aaron, I found my Boston hat. So there you go. Had to get rid of the Yankees one. So
You came up stronger when you were talking
Okay.
about Boston. That's a true
yeah,
fan.
yeah,
So
it's such a beautiful place.
either less energy into the mic or come down a
Okay.
little bit. You're a little hot.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.
No problem at all. Moving on to Tony Mobley, then Michael Ball, and we'll finish with John Edelson. So go ahead, Tony.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good day. How's everybody doing?
Great. You're a little hot, Tony, so come down a little bit. And I forgot, we'll hit Chris Clark at the end.
Luke, I am your father.
A great reference, but not enough to give me a level. So you got to speak a little more, Tony.
I am using the Video 360 this morning as my webcam into my ATEM Mini Pro, into my Mac Mini
You're very
M1.
close to fine. Just maybe one little click down, but don't worry about it too much. And I'm going to go ahead and move to Michael Ball to get you taken care of. Go ahead, Michael.
All right. Good morning from San Francisco. It's been a few weeks, but I'm just in the middle of preparing everything for the spring semester, which for us starts on Monday.
Your level is just fine. You're doing great. John Edelson has your camera blocked, but let's go to Chris Clark and take care of Chris, and maybe John will open up his mic. There he is. Let's do Chris, and then I'll finish up with John. Go ahead, Chris.
Good morning from Tempe, Arizona. Happy to see you all and happy to see Michael back. I'm feeling pretty good about living in Arizona. That changes over the months, but this is a good time to be here.
You sound great. Okay, John, real quick, let's catch you. You've been here so often that
Okay, I'm not with my complete setup. I overslept this morning. As you see, my lighting's not perfect, but
Now, would you accept that from one of your students as an excuse? I'm just
no,
asking.
I wouldn't. Yeah, the usual excuse is, I'm sorry I missed your class. Did you do anything important? And I say, it's great. You missed the day. I didn't do anything important.
The dog ate my ring cam. and my ring light.
Yeah, you're a touch hot, but it's not overshadowing everything. So if you can come down a click or two, then I think we're there. And
I can do
everybody,
it. When you're hot, you're hot. What can I say?
exactly. All right, it's good to see all of you. Welcome to Education Saturday. And Alex, I'm sure we'll be back here in just a moment.
And I will be back in 1 minute. Need to get some tea.
We are kind of light on questions. Seems, unless
Yeah,
there's
I have
stacks
two
someplace else.
in the. Yeah, we only have a total of 3. You're right. So, but sometimes the discussion generates more. Greg, go ahead.
This is for Michael Ball. I noticed that either we guilted you into a solid background, or you decided on your own. What was your thinking process?
Oh, well, I still have a green screen. It was at the time.
Whoa, Michael, you've jumped up a good little bit. You're about 3 dB hotter than you were before.
That's interesting. Yeah, you're right. I don't know what happened there. I don't think I touched anything, unless. All right, I'll pull that back down a bit. But no, at the time that I'd searched for a background, I just couldn't find an image that I liked very much as to use. I guess I had first tried to find a nice actual static background that was a color that I'd liked. And after spending a few weeks trying things, I decided to go the image route, and I found a couple desktop backgrounds that had reasonable color. Although I've noticed today that my actual green screen settings are a bit off from what they should be, but it's fine.
We were talking about in the last hour just the importance of why we've kind of keep on going towards solid backgrounds, because we are just finding repeatedly that people compress better, with a solid background, and it's a little lower maintenance, and depth of field is important too. Also, so things that are out of focus behind you tend to be easier for the computer to compress, and so people just tend to look better. They get better frame rates, and so that's kind of the technical end of it as well.
I just noticed Emily had her hand up. So hi,
Hey,
Emily.
Emily.
Can you do a quick mic check?
Sure. Hi, guys. I had a small thing come up real quick that I had to take care of, and now I'm here. So hopefully my levels are good. I'm not in gallery mode yet, so I can't see.
You're great. Everything's fine.
Am I good? Awesome.
Yep.
Thanks.
So before we get started, I think kind of have the standard question of just how are things going, like what's working, what's not working, what are people thinking about in the education world before we get into. We've got time. I think we don't have a ton of questions. If you have questions about education, this is the time to go ahead and post them into Mukana. But if anyone has anything specific, I mean, I'm watching between the $82 billion and the $170 billion now promised or at least proposed. What goes through my head is, you could revolutionize school with that. That could be, $250 billion. I'm sorry, not million, but $250 billion. In a small amount of that would change the way school is forever. But I have to admit, my pessimism sometimes overtakes me when I start thinking through it. Go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, I'm just going to claim what Alex was talking about in the last thing, where I think you're talking about NFL players, that you forget about what the bad play was 5 minutes ago, and you just focus. So next week is going to be amazing. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that most schools are going back to school. I mean, so most people are back. Even though COVID is the worst it's ever been. But I don't quite understand the math. But okay.
Yeah. And Chris, last week we were talking to Chris, and Chris mentioned, morale is the most important thing leaders bring to an organization. And so I think I'm just trying to keep positive, keep things up, keep students excited about learning, which is why we're here, and everything else will just fall into place, I think.
Is there anything specific that's showing up that's working or not working? Or
for me, I'm doing a hybrid thing, which, obviously.
How's that working?
It's well, I'm pretty much just doing 2 different things. I figured out I can't address them all the same way. So I do like a pre-show that Alex kind of talked about before. And then I have pre-recorded a message just to the Zoom students. And so it's about 3 minutes, and I just play that on Zoom. And then I turn my attention to the class. It's really the David Letterman whole warm up the studio audience and then ignore them basically. And so I put that, here's what we're going to do. And while I'm playing that on Zoom, I'm addressing the rest of the class and interacting, stuff like that. And then when I do breakout rooms, I make sure the classroom students aren't in any of those breakout rooms. And so the breakout rooms are the Zoom people, and the students here are just here in the classroom. And then I'm talking to them. And I think I put up a countdown thing in
I saw that. Looked
in
nice.
Mukana. And so I just play that in the background while I'm talking to them, so they know if they get back early, we'll and so I think it's just being intentional about which audience are we talking to at which time. If they're a classroom person, they have to have a microphone where everybody can hear them. So I think it's moving along as well as it can.
Right. Questions are starting to stack up, so let's go ahead and jump into them. Bill, do you want to?
Okay, we have a pretty complex one from A. Mitchells, who's interested in
a complex question from A. Mitchells. I'm stunned.
Yeah, I know, amazing. And I've got a note or two.
I don't know if we would get. I don't know if we would get through these hours though without A. Mitchells asking some good complex questions that we can chew on. So thanks, A. Mitchells. Someday you'll come join the panel.
Yeah.
It'll be like an A. Mitchells spotting. Anyway, all right, go ahead.
With Chrome apps being killed in June 2021 in favor of only web apps, how will that affect higher resource feature demand apps such as Zoom? How will this affect the massive market of Chromebook users that companies like this would like to cater to? And how will it affect education and how that works in its effect? And he notes the largest portion of Chromebook users is what he's talking about. Also, has anyone else found that web apps seem much less efficient in terms of system resource usage? They appear to be a bit of a hog compared to their Chrome app versions. And what about those that turn off access in Zoom to web clients? A lot to parse there.
There's a lot there. I think we just pick out what are people using a lot of the web apps? I think that's the question. Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, it's tough for me to say exactly how much I think it'll affect things. I mean, I guess the baseline that I'd say is if you're using the Zoom desktop app right now, you are by and large using a web application that is built on top of Google Chrome. And so there are a whole bunch of different things that happen when you separate that piece out. Like, I tend to prefer desktop applications, even if they are wrappers around web apps, because I think they're a little bit more stable. There's some of the usability things, but I mean, what Chrome is really, they're deprecating the Chrome apps and trying to push people towards Chrome extensions, which are things that still run in your web page, but also have those additional options for tools that can modify the web page, add features around it, whatever it might be. And so from sort of a performance, tooling, everything you can get, if people are actively maintaining their applications and extensions, you should be able to do pretty much the same stuff one way or the other.
Yeah.
You're always going to have the case that on a Chromebook specifically, you don't have true, external native applications. But I think that basically goes with the territory. So I guess mostly it's if you're using an app that has been kept up to date, it will hopefully be fine. But the real challenge is tools that have been working but are not actively maintained. Those are where you might be relying on something and it kind of goes away.
I think the Chromebooks are just the most amazing technology ever to empower people to be mediocre. Anyway, Roscoe?
Yeah, most districts are making every student, up on the cloud. So the book itself and the apps don't matter, and they'll be all pulled in and refreshed over the summer. So that's why I'm glad it's not happening till June. But most districts pull in all those Chromebooks, iPads. I wish they didn't, but
I think Chrome, and I will say that I bought Chromebooks early on. We were working for Google, so I had them, and I found them to be somewhat inconvenient. And then just couldn't use audio interfaces to work with them, and couldn't get a couple of things. So I think I have one around here floating around. I didn't really grow to dislike them until COVID, when I watched my kids struggle with them and have it crash and not work, and the limited tool set and everything else. And I've grown from a mild distaste to a complete hatred of those little pieces of hardware. And now my school was giving me a hard time about my son not being on Chromebooks, and what they got back was an email about how, hey, we got more money coming. It'd be great if you bought real computers. Like it would, I know you have more money. It'd be great if you could replace these with something that actually worked. Sorry, they're just horrible little pieces of poop. Anyway, next question.
Oh, it comes from Laura Thompson here in the panel from Beaumont, Texas, who's taking a little bit of a temperature of the panel. How is everyone doing coming into the new year?
We kind of did
Anything
that.
you're looking forward to? Or do you think so?
I think that was that we kind of kicked it off there. I mean, unless someone has anything else they want to talk about how they're doing.
Well, I can talk a little bit about how we're doing. So we're not a bricks and mortar school. We're not a school district. We're educational programs that parents sign their kids up for. And what we saw starting in the new year was a lot more kids coming in from Europe, joining our classes. So
wow, that's it. Now, where are you based?
We're in Vancouver. Our dev team is Vancouver, but our stuff is all in the cloud. So just
and what kind of classes do you provide? I'm really interested in the study aid business.
So we do design and computational thinking through video game design. So kids are working with us. They're doing project-based learning, but they're building video games. We're teaching them.
What age group?
We focus 8 to 12. Go a little bit higher if we need to, but that's kind of our sweet spot.
And what's the cost? Sorry, I might put my son in it. This sounds great.
I mean, of course, I'm here to promote, but I'm here really to speak to a bunch of people and learn about what you're doing. So yeah, costs are whatever. It's like $20 US an hour for the instruction. But that being said, what's interesting for me with COVID is the expectations of where kids are and when are they available is shifting week to week. And you could watch the news and just, this country has just shut down something. And then we see traffic coming from that country, at 9 a.m. or at 8 p.m. And in that sense, the shift to education is becoming much more global. And, the clock is really running the entire day because we're finding kids on the East Coast in Florida who are joining us in what seems like 1 p.m. their time. So I don't know why they don't have a class in school or a remote learning session going on, but they seem to have free time in the middle of the day. So it's very, very interesting.
I know for my kids, their schedule is kind of chaos, and so they're starting early. They have huge gaps in the middle of the morning. Then they have, then they come back and they have a couple classes. So I could totally see how, and they're done. My kids are usually done by 2. I think that, they have whatever personal study, but they're not, but I could totally see how they would do that. I find that to be, well, and because I've thought that there's a real power in schools being able to be we've talked about it here, not being geographically constrained. And how old is your school? I'm just kind of curious.
Online, we're 6 months old, but we were brick and mortars for 5 years before COVID.
And do you think you'll go back to brick and mortar?
I think we will because, but in this kind of a hybrid in a way, because the brick and mortar is your childcare. It's facilitated childcare. Parents have to work. Kids, need to be out of the house and supervised. But now we used to show up with a cart of Chromebooks that we booted Linux into, but we don't have to do that anymore. Now the kids can actually bring their own devices because it's coming through a web browser, and I don't have to worry about what extension is installed, if you have admin rights on your computer, what the configuration is. If you have Chrome, I know that it will work. And so in that way, the constraints of browser-based technologies, it puts the onus on the curriculum developer, but it frees the kids and their families from being IT administrators, which we know even in school districts, there are just not enough IT administrators to maintain the machines that they actually have. So if you can deliver it through the browser, in our experience, we'll sacrifice functionality and performance for consistency of experience.
And they're building the games in Chrome. And how are the
Unity?
In Unity, right? Inside of the Chrome browser, though. And interesting. How do you structure the classes? Or the instruction? When someone signs up, do they sign up for like a 10-week course on building games, or is it ongoing?
We do both. We have some drop-in stuff where kids just show up and, there's just the bare bones you need to learn that in 5 or 10 minutes. And then otherwise, if you're in a program, there's 10 minutes, 15 minutes of education. And then the rest of the time is practicing and mastering your information. So, we try to follow a bit more of like a Montessori kind of methodology of, we'll show you a little bit and then you start pulling information. right?
Well,
What did
that's-
that inspire you to do?
I didn't know that that was a Montessori thing, but that's exactly what we do here. If you watch our second hours, it's like, hey, we'll talk for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're just going to see what people need to know. You know, like get away from the kind of the long lecture. Interesting. Very cool. Thanks, Daniel. Sorry for putting you on the spot there, but
No, I could talk for an hour about what we do. I think in everything, people get super excited about it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm here to also learn about what the heck is going on in education elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. All right, next question.
Craig Hibbert is in with schools have been jumping between everyone in a classroom, all online and hybrid. Is the education community settling down in how they approach this at all?
Silence.
Yeah,
go ahead, Emily.
So we closed, I don't know, the day before Christmas, and then we go back to school on Tuesday after Martin Luther King Day. And they did that to kind of like ride the wave of, the holiday exposure. Numbers went way up over the holidays, but they seem to be dropping right now. So everyone has decided between two options, which is hybrid only. So no, everyone back in school, that's not allowed here yet. And then a couple of our schools are remaining remote only because they're smaller school districts. And with the vaccine being rolled out, teachers having to take time whenever they can get the appointment. So like mine was at 12:15 on Thursday. And then it's not part of our day. We just get to leave and go take care of that. And that takes an hour. So they don't have enough subs to cover everyone in the smaller school districts. So, and quarantining people who actually do trace positive. So they've decided to remain remote until President's Day. And so it feels like it's more consistent as far as like the districts are saying right now. Going forward, if we go remote, like if the students go remote for whatever reason, the teachers are going to have to report to the school building no matter what. So there will be no working from home for teachers anymore, only for the students. And there are a variety of reasons for that. Some positive, like people need good access to technology, Wi-Fi, things in their classroom. And some of it is they need to babysit us for the taxpayers and see full parking lots to get their budgets passed. So, but I do feel like it is becoming more consistent across the board in our area, and not so like, today we're doing this and tomorrow we might do this, so have a go bag ready. It's kind of the levels dropping. Whether it's justified or not is, I still don't. I think they're just trying to make us feel a certain way to get us comfortable and just follow what they want us to do. I'm not sure it's being based in a lot of fact.
Go ahead, Greg, and then Laura.
Okay, so unfortunately, over here in Norwegia, we have escalating cases in all the small towns where we didn't, and it's mostly because of a lot of people traveling for the holidays and parties and this and that. But what's happening is they're giving decisions about online teaching like in 2-week increments. Okay, so this makes it totally impossible, for any of the instructors to plan things, because if you're going to move, from even a hybrid or an on location style, you have to really radically rework your thing to make it work for online. It's much easier to plan for online and then go back to, gathering. That's easy. Mm-hmm. But going the other way is not easy at all. And they're just not giving us a chance here. And the other thing is that the kids are asking questions. Do I travel back to school or not? And there's no answers.
This is why a lot of times I'm always a big fan of pick what is going to happen and then just plan out long term against it. We see this in production just all the time. People they don't want to make a decision. What they're caught between is what they want and what is so. So they and what you're seeing is them jutting back and forth between what they want to be in the world and what actually is in the world. And that oscillation, you're running east and west and not north and south, and everyone anybody who's watched almost any sport that people run around in, running east to west is not usually the way to go. It's not usually the way to win a game. And so that's really the challenge. Go ahead, Laura, and then Roscoe.
One of the, I need this hashtag that says unique perspective, but as an advisor, our university went through and gave every professor the option to do online, in person, or hybrid. So we have like our core classes, everybody has to take like our English 1301. Literally, when I'm advising a student, we have to look at every section of 1301. Is it hybrid? Is it in person? Or is it online?
Mm-hmm.
And it is, now some of our departments unilaterally said, like our math department, we're putting everything online. No choice, boom, done. But our English department let every professor choose. And it is a crazy, because then you've got the students that they don't know, and they're coming back going, and I find that my students in higher ed have one of three perspectives. I want to be absolutely in the classroom, I want to be absolutely online, or I just don't care, just get me into classes. And it's very difficult trying to juggle this when it's not uniform across. They took our one gym and they actually made it a classroom so that they can social distance a class of 30 or 40.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our so only so many classes can be fully face-to-face, like our event spaces have been turned into classrooms.
Yep.
But it's really hard when you've got students going, I need to be online for X, Y, and Z, but this particular class is only taught by one person. It's only being taught fully face-to-face.
Right.
You know, I wish there would be a more consistency in our university.
Right. Yeah. John, and then oh, sorry, Roscoe, and then John.
I'll let John go
Michael.
first. Let John go ahead.
And Roscoe may want to add to this. California will be very interesting. The chancellor of the California State University system was one of the first to say that we weren't going to go back to campus in the fall. And so the CSU system is clearly online also on the spring. It has made some indications that it plans to go back to face-to-face in some mode this coming fall, 2021. Some interesting things, though, to look at. So I'm not saying what's going to happen, but one, the budget that the California governor has proposed for higher ed is richer than they thought it would be. And this is without the additional federal support. Another big change, though, is the chancellor who made the decision to go totally, online for a year, retired, and the new chancellor, who was the former president of CSU Fresno, just started January 1st. So we really don't know where he is. The chancellor took the heat with the shutdown for the California university system. The individual presidents didn't have to make choices. So the question we're discussing now is going on at every level in the CSU. And Roscoe, I'll release 2 minutes of my time to Roscoe from Southern California.
And let's try to move quickly. We went from no questions to lots of questions, and I have a pretty hard out at 9. So let's cut through. Go ahead,
I'll make
Roscoe.
it quick. I'm not going to talk CSU, but my son, who's in the elementary school district in IT here, they flipped. They had all the teachers at home. They had all the teachers coming in and all the students at home. I've got this. Sorry, I had to talk quick. Long story short, it's now voluntary whether or not the student comes into the school. And so the teachers are not there. The teachers are teaching from home. This is kind of a bizarre experiment. And so what's going to happen is at the lower income school where mom and dad need the kids to be taken care of during the day, 85% participation. At the high income school, I can't use names, but it's about 5% participation.
Right. Well, and I think that's I actually think that's a fascinating approach, which is the idea that the teacher's going to stay at home or teacher's not going to be there. And then you're giving people what they need, what some people need, which is childcare or infrastructure. It could be also just infrastructure of they don't have the internet, they don't have a place to go, they don't have a place to do that, focus, all those things.
Right.
But you're keeping everybody on the same playing field in the sense that the teacher is, and I'll just keep, say it at least once a week, that as a teacher, it's way easier. Next Saturday, I'll have my whole system up because I have a presentation due on Fridays, which means that usually things take a long time until I have a due date. And so I have to show off my full hardware rig on Friday. And so the rebuild or finishing the rebuild is going to happen very quickly. So anyway, I'll show it to you, and it's just much easier. Anyway, I just find it to be much easier as an instructor. If when you put the hardware in, then if I could never do what I do in a classroom. Michael, and then Kent, and then Chris.
what I was going to say was, I mean, similar actually to in the UC system, similar pretty much to the CSU system, we committed sometime in the fall to an all online spring. And they've now recently said that we're looking to fall 2021. And, the plan is going towards in person, but it's pretty much entirely dependent on vaccine distribution, which is, I think, a very reasonable thing to make in-person participation contingent on. The one thing that is a little bit fluid is for smaller courses, which for us, smaller courses at Berkeley ends up being the 30 or less mark usually. My courses are typically 200 or 300, but those smaller courses will be able to, at some point, if it's safe and campus partially reopens, at least do outdoor meetings and then use occasionally some bigger spaces. But that's really kind of dependent on very local sort of, conditions, and that they make changes sort of month by month. But the plan really is online first, in person, if the conditions improve and if it's safe to do so. And right now that's hopefully looking like sort of February to March, and then maybe, after a little bit of post spring break quarantining time, the end of the semester, hopefully. But that's 3 months out, and no one really knows for sure.
Yeah, Kent.
Yeah, so the analogy I use is that it's sort of like when we lived in Dallas, Fort Worth. The philosophy in Dallas is you drive as fast as you can until somebody crashes, and then everybody slows down. And it's kind of what it is. Let's bring everybody together until somebody gets it, and then we'll kind of stop for a while, and then we'll go 100 miles again. And I'm not sure if that's the most effective, but that seems to be the philosophy that's people are using.
Go ahead, Chris.
This is state of the state season in many states. And I call it hurricane season because certainly in Arizona, the governor called for reopening schools in ways that are at odds with the infection rate and the hospitalization rate and so on and so forth. So my analogy of hurricane season is that things are all going to be stirred up and flooded and wrecked for a while, mixed messages, and then we'll have a month or so to clean up the debris and try to restore things to a more consistent and practical message. So my counsel to my colleagues in Arizona education is let's wait till the rain stops, wait till the eye of the hurricane passes, and then it'll be time to put things on a more rational basis.
Yeah. Next question. And we're going to move, we're going to have to move a little bit faster than we're moving because we got really conversational and now there's a whole bunch of questions. And I have, again, a harder out. I might let you guys keep running for a little bit if I run at the end. I'm just in a production. So anyway, next question.
Well, this one's kind of pitched up for you. James Babbitt says, hi, Alex, could you comment on the teaching style of James Burke and Alton Brown?
Well, so here's the interesting thing about that question. And you guys have probably heard me say this before, so I'll keep it quick, but my teaching style is based on Alton Brown and James Burke. Alton Brown's teaching style is based on James Burke. So it all comes back to James Burke, which I'm still trying to get on our show. Like trying to get him to join with us and come on some Saturday or something like that. I don't have a contact with. I used to have his email, and I now don't have it, and so I can't. I'm trying to figure out how to get a hold of him. So anyway, here's what I think that they do really well is both of them, and I tweeted this out because I really want to see connections get done again by Alton Brown with ILM backing him up, like make it a Disney Plus show or a Apple TV show, give him all the money and let them go crazy, in reenactments. And if you look back at Connections, and if you haven't, how many people here have seen Connections? I just want to, if you haven't seen Connections, it's free on the internet.org or archive.org or internetarchive.org, whatever. You can find it. Someone put it up there until they take it down. It's up there, all the episodes. My kids, it was recorded 40 years ago. My kids are 11 and 13, and they will watch every single one of them, and you can't talk when they're in the room. They won't use their iPads. They don't look down. They don't look at anything else. They just watch Connections. and they'll watch connections over almost anything else that they have access to. So when we think about kids' attention span, when we think about holding them and them being distracted and everything else, it has to do with content density. And what James Burke was really good at and what Alton Brown was really good at is a very high content density mixed with storytelling. So they are able to tell a story. They draw this, they have a thread that pulls all this stuff together, and then they pack it with lots and lots of things that are interesting. But that thread is important because a whole bunch of information coming at you at one time is not useful unless it has context, because you can't hang on to it. So you can't hang on to that information without it there. And so as a piece of what I do in training, when I build them, is I think a lot about those shows. I own every Good Eats and I have all the connections and I watch them relatively often, especially certain episodes that I like. When I think about making videos, I think about that a lot because I'm trying to make it really dense. I'm trying to use the right camera angle. The big thing about Good Eats as a backup was that Good Eats it's a cinematographer. That's what Alton Brown was before he was cooking. He didn't like cooking shows, but he loved cooking. So he went to school to learn how to cook. He didn't go to school to learn how to make the show. He already knew how to make shows, right? And so what you see is a person who knows how to make shows learning the skill set that he needs to, and then that's why Good Eats is so much different than everything else, because he came from it from a filmmaker's perspective. So single camera, single shot, everything dense, highly cut together, highly produced, interesting angles, things that tell that story. Every angle, if you watch it, and I think the quintessential one is the Turkey Derrick. That episode is kind of quintessential Good Eats, where every shot matters, every word matters. It's tied together. It's somewhat entertaining. My father always says when he's building a talk, and my dad talks a lot, more than I do. So anyway, in front of a lot of people, and he said you need to inspire, educate, and entertain. Those are the three things, and he can tell you where he's doing that all the time, in what he's doing, and every talk has the same. That has to have those ingredients, in that process. And Alton Brown does that every single show, and what James Burke is good at is just lots of dense. It's interesting. The story, to get to what Sky often talks about, the story that he tells you in connections is what keeps you going. It connects it. We're going from here to here to here, but then he's dumping all this information on you, And so as the video portion of an education process, I find that very, and I think that we need video that gets us excited about something. We need text that lets us refer back to things so that we can remember them. We need discussion like what we're having here so that we can fill in all the gaps. Audio so that we can have the kind of contextual conversation that I can do while I'm walking around or working. I can just kind of absorb more information, and then interactive to kind of play with it. And if you pull all those medias together, I think that you end up with what I think is the next generation of education. Anyway, since someone raised their hand, we'll just move on. Next question.
James Foslian of Bloomington says, EDU, the professor wants the highest resolution stream, has a 4K camera, doesn't like Zoom's resolution, asked about 4K streams. What would you suggest?
Go ahead, Michael, and then Guy.
Yeah, I suppose there's a lot of things, but I mean, I would say that there's two things. Guy, if he would like, can talk about the various hacks for getting at least 720p pretty reliably in a Zoom room. It is highly helpful. I gave Facebook $130 to do it, for one thing. But I guess what I'd say is, if you don't like the quality of Zoom, there's for just streaming out, pretty much any application that can live stream to YouTube or hardware device. So this could be, our favorite ATEM Mini Pros. It could be OBS. Anything that can stream to YouTube, you can crank that up as high as your computer will support. And so I've had pretty good success sending things out that way. My preferred path, which is a little bit complicated, is if I'm doing something live in Zoom, where for me still, any other tool that I can use, Zoom is the easiest for students. It's what they're familiar with. I will record or stream to a second place if I need that higher fidelity. So personally, that could be a hyperdeck set to right now probably 1080p. That's usually good enough for me, but I will occasionally back up stream to YouTube as well. And just that dual recording method, or that dual sort of destination method at least, is is for me at least the most reliable way to have students have a seamless experience, but have an output that is controllable. The other nice thing about doing at least a file recording is in the event that I need to edit it, it's nice and easier to cut and upload that way, but you might not always have that ability.
The one thing I would say is that I when YouTube came out with 4K, just records, this was probably over a decade ago, I very quickly made a Mac break that was 4K. I wanted to be the first 4K Mac break, and I had Sal Segoyan in, and we almost lost the event because it was so hard to do. And there's a whole bunch of problems that we ran into. One is the screen, all the text was really small. The processing took a long time, and then I've done a lot of 4K streaming, 4K 360, stereo 4K 360, and what I've been left with is that you just want to make sure you know why. Having a high resolution is important, but why you need a high resolution? And look at it like, does it actually serve what you're doing? Now, in this discussion, the reason we pushed for 1080, which is why we have it, is not so that we can have a discussion in 1080. It's so that I can do training with 1080. So we're going to start doing more stuff with Andy, and we're going to do stuff with Resolve, and I needed 1080p because you can't see the screen other than a screen share, and then it's really low. But when you incorporate live 4K, you can't really do that live like the way Zoom works, because that requires so much bandwidth that the chances of doing that smoothly with low buffer in the current limitations of the internet would be very low. You'd end up breaking up and falling apart. You can stream to YouTube in 4K. It'll take it your most hardware under $5,000 will have a hard time reliably doing 30 frames a second. Except for Clearcaster is what I was about to mention. So guys showing you the Clearcaster there. There may be other
right there. Oh, whoops.
NDI.
NDI.
The Clearcaster is one that will do the 4K. There may be other tools that are coming soon that support 4K. So if I had to buy it, I probably wouldn't buy it immediately. I at least want to have the choice. But this one, there's a couple choices I think that are coming. So by March, you should have a few choices in 4K if you really want to do that. You just have to know why, and you're going to have buffer. Like, you do not want to do low latency. You want to do regular latency. So you're going to have 20 seconds between the time you do it. And so is that worth the cost of doing that? And that's the thing that you have to ask yourself. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I would invite him to look at somebody like Michael's image. He's using a like $800 Zcam E2C, I believe is his camera, with a nice lens on it. And so is that enough? And if it's just the look, then of course it's lighting, a camera with a larger sensor. But then if it truly is a resolution thing, the Portal hack that we've been talking about, this is the Portal Plus right behind me, that'll get you to 720p just by having it join the meeting. So that might be enough for him. But I've streamed in 4K with the Wowza Clearcaster to YouTube, and it's about 25 megabits up, which is a pretty big tax on a system. So if you have the bandwidth and he has the $5,400 to get that unit, then you could steer him that way. So
yeah, the quality of the glass on your lens seems to, in my experience, has been the biggest difference. So when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I have a couple of people I know who use their $500 Canon SLRs as the video source, with a nice lens on it. I'm like, how does your video look so good? It's crisp, it's clear, it's sharp. You've got some nice stuff, the field going, and it immediately just boosts up the quality. So, I mean, if you got a 4K webcam, you're still looking at a little piece of plastic in front of it, and it's going to look like crap.
And to your point, I would choose more cameras and camera position, easy camera position over resolution at any time of the day. I'd much rather have a camera that I can pick up and show you something close up, or have multiple cameras where I'm showing you something close up and then cutting this away to something and then cutting around. I'd much rather do that at 1080 or even 720 than have a 4K static image. And again, once you go into 4K, it's heavy lifting all the way through. And it just creates big bottlenecks. And that's what you want to really think about. Again, there may be reasons if you're doing art, or if you're doing circuit design, or you're doing something else, there might be reasons that 4K would be beneficial, but you just have to make sure that it really means something. Go ahead, Michael, and then Roscoe, and then we're going to move on.
That's basically what Alex just said. I technically, just in case anyone's curious, I have the E2M4 because I can use my Canon EF glass. I would have liked to use my SLR, but I use it too much for photography, and I don't want to tear things down. But yeah, I think for me, the distinction is for when I'm using code as the thing that I'm primarily teaching about, there there is definitely a resolution difference between even 720p and 1080p. So, that is one of the reasons that I do like pre-recording some of my videos, is that if I am showing code on the screen, that resolution will make a difference to students. And if they are watching videos at home, they have the bandwidth problem is somewhat alleviated compared to streaming situation. But it really is, in my testing, my advisor has always been one to push the limits of resolution in things that we've done. So we have done a few 4K things. We found, at least for us, there's a drop off at that level, but it's getting possible to do a little more easily. But it really is finding the tools that you need to show students or have them work with, and what resolution gives you the fidelity to see it. And that is different per application. But
good, Roscoe.
Large class 4K latency is not an issue if you can get questions back by chat. Small class, you're going to want that interactivity. You're going to want that low latency.
Yeah, absolutely. Guy, you had one last note.
Yeah, one thing is, if you know the why, is it legibility? Can you get an ATEM? So this is just an ATEM mini with an iPad. And so if it's small text like this, I can zoom in with just pinch to zoom in. So you just got to ask the why. There's more questions before diving in there.
Yep. Next question.
And we have a pair of them, actually, for Kara here on the panel. The first one comes from Paul Prusakowski in Gainesville.
This is from Kara. It's using Paul's. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. With one of my clients, we're going to be using a private Facebook group for community discussion topics for a 12-week course for nurses. We have 2 learners who don't use Facebook. Any ideas on how we can make sure to include these learners in discussions?
Go ahead, TJ, and then Sean.
I would really look into Discord. It's an amazing platform. You can invite only, so you can keep people you don't want to participate out. And it offers a lot of tools for communication. It's got great apps for phones and for tablets. So you can have almost real-time conversations with individuals that are participating.
John?
And I would recommend another app called VCN, THECN. It was developed by the person who developed Sakai and Angel authoring system. So it is a system free to educators, designed specific for that. So it has some really rich chat and note taking, and I would not use Facebook.
And I would highly recommend Discord. As we've built our platform on it, I would never build a group inside of Facebook, and not because, you can talk about all the things people like and don't like about Facebook, but the chat tools and the comment tools and the community control is about 1% of what Discord's is. And so you're just locking yourself into a thing that doesn't really work very well, for what it's supposed to do, where otherwise you have a tool that is actually built for it, and so I don't know. I know that we're taking your question of how do you include the 2 people that aren't included, and just say you should go their direction, not the other direction. Go ahead, Kara, and then.
Yeah, I guess we did survey people, and we really found out.
You muted there, Kara.
Kara, we heard to
your Zoom mute got kicked off.
Okay. So we did survey the nurses, and as much as we would hope and love that nurses are actually kind of techie, they're actually not. They don't really love to use technology as much as I have 2 sisters that are nurses. So I'm always surprised at the fact that they're calling me to fix their printer or something, and so we surveyed them, and no one really wanted to use something in addition. They didn't want to log into somewhere else. And so that's why we chose to use the Facebook group, because also the Facebook group is that you get to have the units on there, so they can have one place to go for their learning units and all of that. I actually have a plan. I just wanted to see if anybody else had any other ideas of how to include. We're actually going to have one of the facilitators take a snapshot of the discussion every day and email it to those 2 learners and ask if they would like to have their discussion put on the group. It's all optional.
Who's the leader of the group?
It's a woman who's a PhD in nursing, and healing with the arts is the program. So she is not tech savvy at all. So I'm sort of the tech facilitator getting all of the course curriculum delivered, and then we have some other facilitator assistants that are basically interns at the University of Florida that can do some of this, like take a snapshot and email it to people and get them engaged. We have a very small group, which is the good thing. When we get like 600 learners, that's obviously not going to be an option. We don't want to pressure people into using Facebook if they don't want to. That's never anything that we want to do. So this is our pilot course. We'll see how it goes with this one. And then if we do think that it's worth like taking it off of Facebook, then we'll
the
do
hardest
that.
part, all I'll say is that I get where you're going with it. Number one is that I don't usually take I don't take polls. Like we make decisions of like which way we're going to go, and we just tell people, hey, this is where we're going to do it. And we find that people will, and you'll lose a couple, and then after that, they figure it out. When possibility is greater than circumstance, there'll be action. Anyway, so the not giving them a choice is usually the easier way to move people to the right decision.
Well, the thing is it's branching off of a very large Facebook group and page already. So that's really why we decided to do it this way for the pilot. We'll see. We have a small group this first time, and we'll
it could work. There. It could work. The hardest part is moving people from one place to the other. When you're doing something new, is the opportunity to jump into the right thing. And I don't know if it's Discord's the right. It sounds like Discord will be a much better solution than Facebook. I mean, but I'm not probably the best person. I think I log onto Facebook. I lose my password all the time, so I log into Facebook like once every 2 months. So I don't really know what I used to be in groups, and I just found them to be incredibly frustrating, and so I just stopped interacting with them. And so I think that's I'm not probably the best measure of that, because I just don't use them anymore. I used to be in a lot of them, and I just finally a couple flame wars, couple of endless things about things I didn't care about, and I was like, nah, I'm done. And so and I just haven't been back in years. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for meeting students and learners where they are, and that that means two things, right? That means technology that is learnable, even if it's not completely new, or it's somewhat new, just sort of pushing them in that direction. But the other thing that I'd say is, I don't know what the rest of the course delivery looks like, but if you had the opportunity to start sort of fresh or from scratch, the sort of closest that you can get the chat platform, whatever it may be, next to the rest of the course content, if there is a website or another tool, that's to me sort of the best thing. And I will occasionally sacrifice quality in the chat tool for locality of that chat, because that means students are just more likely to use it. And so if you were using another website, you mentioned sort of like sharing a login and things like that, is, just spending time looking for tools that would, hopefully not be too hard to customize. I really do like Discord as a tool. The one thing I will say for any sort of group means in a sort of class setting, this matters more with a larger group, but I really find it very helpful to have platforms which allow students or instructors to specifically mark something as a question and whether or not it has been resolved. Once you get above a couple dozen students, it gets very easy to lose questions in the stream, or to not know, if something needs attention. And so, that matters, I think, a lot more in certain contexts where someone really needs help on a particular assignment. But, that's just one of the things that I would look for. And there are, an infinite number of things that have at least plugins that allow you to set Facebook as a login source. That could be an option in the future, but wholesale switching right now is probably difficult.
Ellie, did you?
I know what Michael was saying about, like, I was just typing a message to her directly. The idea of, if you're going to do Facebook, because most of the people are in Facebook, linking to a separate outside chat. So whether it's like Padlet or a back channel type place to have the discussion, so it's easy for the people who are on Facebook to get to the place. So it's like linked there, and they just click to ask your question here or join the discussion. Because yeah, I hate being forced into Facebook when like I try to avoid it as much as possible. And sometimes I'll not take a class just because it requires me to join a private Facebook group. I much rather join a Discord or a Padlet or whatever it is that someone else is going to give me so that I don't have to create an account and join and be part of something that I don't want to ethically reinforce. So, I don't know. That was just an idea to make it easier for everyone to be on the chat, because I feel like emailing the chat to the participants who aren't is not going to result in a good, authentic discussion.
I mean, the other thing to think about in the long term is that Facebook's not in a death spiral yet, but it's getting close. Like, like it's, like the where you start seeing huge numbers of people leaving, and we think that everybody can last forever, but when Facebook came out, they said, why would anyone use Facebook when they have MySpace? And when Google came out, they were like, why would anyone use Yahoo Google when they have Yahoo? So we just have to know that, most likely I don't think Facebook's going anywhere, but I think most likely there's going to be a massive exodus over this year from Facebook to other things. And so having all your eggs in that basket is probably going to be less and less stable. And this is something that happens all the time. You have a big group and it's really addicting to stay in that group, but you want to at least diversify, because when those people leave, it's harder to get back to them, and so, having other platforms that you're building up and starting to support, kind of spreads the risk, because I do think, it's an incredible, it started building up a little bit a year or two ago, but I'm now seeing just tons and tons of my friends that are all, not in Facebook anymore. And they're pretty, and I think that we're going to keep seeing that kind of erosion of it, just because of the problem is you get into a chain reaction. The people who kept it normal leave, and the people who made it crazy just start to spin up even more. And that's a hard thing for social networks to solve. TJ and then Daniel.
To Kara's point about the nurses wanting to gather with the teams, you can do that kind of thing in Discord. You can set up channels for specific teams. So team 1, team 2, however you define them.
Yep. Daniel?
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I think when it comes to using these tools, right? And Michael mentioned, meet people where they are. And what I've been learning, because I come from a tech background, visual effects, games, like technologies, it's no big deal. Pick up the next tool, it's better, and we'll learn it and use it because we understand the way these tools are kind of architected. But as I try and just bring kids into a meeting, right? Here's the link. Just all you have to do is click on the link. You're done. The number of different ways people can make a mistake, cannot really understand, well, I just clicked, that's too simple. Where's my login? And then if you have to have them have more than one screen up, like you're talking in this one, you're chatting in this one, and you're looking at a browser in this one, navigating between 3 screens on a 13-inch or an 11-inch laptop is really hard. So we have all of these, tools that do one thing, and something like Discord does one thing really, really well, right? It's like the pro version. And when you start getting into the pro version of Zoom, where now you need 3 operators to manage a group, and then Discord, you need 2 people on Discord to manage. You're now really, our events are looking like real studio broadcasts.
Well,
right? With switchers and producers, and I think, so the challenge that we're seeing is that we have the reach suddenly, right? Everybody is now, it's not even a question like, oh, I just want to go in person, I'll just go to the seminar. It's like, no, you're all going to do it online, right? And now the audience has grown beyond that physical constraint to where it can be global. It's a dog's breakfast if you start using more than one tool, right? Unless you're a professional producer of these events. And so when you try and get, and I'm just imagining, right? You get a nurse who has some knowledge that's, they're the specialist, and now they want to disseminate that to a large group. It puts a lot of pressure on that person to not just be the disseminator of knowledge, but be a producer of an event. And there aren't a lot of tools right now. Like, we're starting to see the tools come up that start to bring in a couple of more pieces into one screen, where the instructor, the facilitator can host that event with some consistency, right? Everyone's getting the same experience and you're not worrying about the tech too much. But I think that's the next level of platform that you might be needing to experiment with. And at the beginning of this chat, someone mentioned a couple of platforms like that. But but you might want to experiment in trying some of those out, because it's hard to manage more than one application and get people to get that running.
It comes to, there's a lot of wetware. There's a lot of hardware development, software development, and what people forget is wetware development, which is developing people. And that wetware development becomes super important when you're trying to get them to transition from one place to the other. I sent out kits to executives that were complex. They were very, very complex kits. And the way, like 3 Pelican cases show up at your door with a tripod because we can't go into your house, and you have to put it together. And it's a 6K camera with lights that are separate and a mic and a teleprompter and how do we put it all together? And it has to come out the other end. And we color coded it. We spent weeks building them and figuring out how to streamline them. We color coded everything that you would touch. We built a PDF on how to do it. We built a video on how to do it. And then I got online and walked them through it if they needed it. And some of the executives, you'd show up and they're all set up. They're like, I got this. There were other ones that you were like, this is this, and you walk them through it and you make that work. And if you're willing to do that, and the key is, and again, I talked about this earlier, but the equation that I use all the time, when possibility is greater than circumstance equals action. So if you get the key people into a new location, everybody else will figure it out. And so, you just have to create the possibility bigger than the circumstances, them getting into the new platform. The possibility is they get to hang out with these certain people and everything else. And so that's how you move them over that pipeline. And so, anyway, it's just something to kind of to think about, in that process of how you coax people from one place to the other, is make it really easy for them to get there. I actually make it hard. The way we set up this is created to be hard on purpose, harder, because it just, in its current stage of development, the goal is actually to weed people out. So that's why Discord's only available every once in a while, and that's why other things are only available, and we put things out and it's kind of cryptic. It's mostly so that I get people that are really committed. So you're building a very dense core, and then when we start to promote it, and we'll make it easier, for people to do that slowly. But the idea though is that, so you have to decide whether you're trying to grow fast or grow slow as well. Next question, and this will be my last one, and I'm going to wander off.
Yeah, we're moving on to Sky Gleason.
I gave up on trying to get to the end, so I just said I'll just leave and let Bill keep. Bill, are you okay to keep asking questions for a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll let it run. Okay. Keep going.
Sky's in with another Carla Negri question. What trends in education are you seeing? People solution, money solution, attitude shifts.
So I do have to give the caveat that I mostly work with adult learning. I do not work with K through 12 ever. So
I think that's good. It's a good representation, because I think we spend a lot of time talking K through 12, which is great. But I think that looking at all of the aspects is good.
Right. So I have a master's in online learning. So obviously I have been drawn to what can I do online that doesn't make me have to get on a plane and go somewhere for years now. So it's been about 5 or 6 years since I stopped traveling 3 weeks out of the month and dedicated to what can I do, from a computer. And so I've always loved the challenge of how can I take something that's supposed to be done in person and make it the same as, online. And it all really does come down to what is the assessment that you're looking for at the end. You have to always start with what's the goal at the end. And if it is that someone has to demonstrate something, that's a really difficult one, but also really fun for an online learner, specialist to take that challenge of, okay, so I have to kind of like what Alex said, I have to somehow figure out how to grade someone on putting together a robot that's going to produce for spinal surgery, which is a very serious matter. How do I take that course and put that online? So, so that's some of the fun stuff. And so I would say that the biggest thing that I have seen is the attitude shift. Like people are coming to me with how can we do this? And that's what I love about it, is because I've always seen the value of providing online education. And I love the challenge of making that a real solution. Like I have use Articulate software for testing people on how they use software. So you can use Articulate to record yourself doing a certain sequence of events within a software, and then you can easily turn that into a quiz where they have to click on the right spot of the software, and you then, you can assess them in that way. So that is one way that attitudes have shifted. So people are definitely having a harder time. I would say lecturers, like hardcore lecturers, are having a hard time learning how to be facilitators, engaging their audiences, because they're so comfortable standing up there and not having anybody speak back to them. And we've seen with Zoom, that people will just gloss over, and they're not engaged. So you really have to teach them how to do that.
They were glossing over before too.
They were
lectures
exactly
never worked.
100%. And so that's why I've always loved online learning, is that I can engage them, and I can actually measure how I engage them with the data from the LMS. So, and then the other thing is like money. Typically I work with clients on, okay, what's the main priority for us to get out of this course? And I will help them and brainstorm for free with no expectation for how they can think outside the box of how they're going to engage people. But then I typically say, okay, if your budget is this, let's build this awesome landscaping activity where they have to plan a landscape, and that's how we're going to assess them. And we wouldn't be able to do that with an online course before. So I work with them on their budget to say, okay, if the most important thing is for them to prove that they could plan a landscape, then let's use that money to make that interaction where they have to plan a landscape and show me on the computer that they did that. So, but yeah, I mean, there's some instances where we just decide, with some of my medical tech companies, it is not okay to put that online. You have got to have an expert in person with that learner to make sure that they know how to put that robot together that's then going to operate on a person. Like, that's something that I, am very strong morally and ethically about, is that not everything can be turned into online learning. So that's some of the ideas that have been, but it's been exciting. As much as 2020 has sucked for everybody, I love the problem solving of figuring out how to take something that's usually taught in person and making it super fun and engaging and fun. Really, for adult learners, they need fun too.
Thank you very much. That was great.
I think that one of the big things that I notice a lot when we're talking to people is who's onus, who are we going to hold responsible for attention? Is it the student or the teacher? Like, that is the fundamental, when you think about when I think about how I structure something, do I expect, is it the job of the student to pay attention, or is it the job of the teacher to keep their attention? Now, I will argue how I hold all of mine is that it's my job. Like, it's my job. It's like, if they're not paying attention, it is my fault. It is, and I don't hold them at all responsible at all. Like, it is like, I can, my job is to walk in. Even when I used to do it in person, is to try to do everything I can to electrify the room, and how do we get there? And usually I come in with something. I think I told the story before. I had 1,500 people, 8:30 in the morning on for an After Effects course. I was like, oh my gosh, you put me in a morning. This is second day. Second day, for those who speak at events, second day 8:30 is like the worst slot, because everyone is hungover. Everybody's like whatever, but they paid for it and they're showing up and they're all like whatever. And so I had this laptop that I had broken in a car crash a couple weeks ago, and airbag. It was fender bender, but anyway, it got broke. And so it was my stunt laptop, and I had a whole plan, and I walked up, and as I got up to the stage, right at the last step, I tripped just a little bit, and I let that laptop go, and it went 15 feet. It just went out, and you just heard the whole 1,500 people go, and then it hit, and they're like, whoa, like that, and then I didn't say anything, but I just picked it up, and I just looked at it, and I said, that's why you pull that out. That's why you have a backup. And I pulled it out, and everyone was like, wow, and they all had a good time. But now they're awake, and that took me all evening to think about, like, how I was going to do it, where I looked at the stage, I looked at where it could hit, I looked at, but the point is that I'm always trying to figure out, where that's going to how am I going to grab onto them, and get them thinking about stuff. And you'll see, I think, many great instructors doing that. The physics teacher who does the ball, have you ever seen that? It's scary. It makes me uncomfortable. I know that he's not going to lose his face, but it makes me uncomfortable every time I watch. Like, I just can't, it's just like too much for me. Anyway, so, but those kinds of things that gather students' attention. And I think that we have more tools to do that now online than we ever had in the classroom. The infrastructure is easier to do it that way. Go ahead, Chris.
For a one-shot deal, I completely agree with you that the presenter or the leader is, no pun intended, but is responsible primarily to make it engaging.
Mm-hmm.
For a course or a longer relationship with a group of students or an individual student, I like to frame it as a collaborative. That is, we're collectively responsible for using this time to our best advantage. And that includes, making the most of the opportunity that we have to engage with the subject matter. It's an I, thou, it situation where the it is the curriculum, if you will, or the message or the competence that we're building toward. And so, and spending a lot of time in the first meetings of a course trying to introduce this idea, which is counter to the experience of most of our students most of the time, that, well, we're a learning community here. It's not us and them. It's not the faculty and the empty vessel students, but rather it's an opportunity to work together, that everybody in the room has something to offer everybody else in the room, and everybody in the room has a lot to learn from everyone else in the room. It's not automatic, it's not easy, but it pays off a third of the way into the course when this learning community ethos kicks in. So
yeah, and I agree. I mean, obviously, these sessions every day are that, right? That they're not. These sessions are not me. When I say I hold myself accountable as the buck stops with me, that people are still showing up but it's in my job, at least at the beginning, was to get people to show up and give them something that was structured. So, I created worked on the structure of, hey, we're going to raise our hands, and we're not going to swear, and we're not going to talk about religion and politics, and we're not going to, we're going to have a structure to it. And this is the hours that we're going to do it. And this is the structure that we're going to do it. But it's really building, it's like, think of it as building what you need to grow tomatoes. Like you need to build a scaffolding that everything's going to grow on. If you don't do that, they're just going to wander around on the ground. And I think a lot of people, do that. And so it's my accountability to work on that. But to your point, it is the most efficient way to do this is exactly the way we're doing it, which is, this conversation doesn't happen with me. It happens with us. The questions, the panelists, this is probably the most us I've ever been in. Because OSC yesterday, we had a conversation about OSC yesterday. I was terrified because I made up the thing without just assuming that the right people would show up. And I was quietly emailing the first hour going, hey guys, are you going to come? Because it would be really complicated if you're not here. And so, because that's where the group has gotten into, is that it's bigger than anything that I know how to do. And speaking of bigger than anything that I know how to do, I have to jump out of this and go wander off, but I'm going to leave it to Sky to can you keep editing, Sky? You got it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and then Bill, I'll let you run it. So you guys can finish off the questions. Bill, you can cut the questions off whenever it makes sense. But thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Alex.
So hard for me to leave if I wasn't in this giant production. It's like I was like, oh, we got all these questions and we can talk for the next 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go. All right,
We've achieved
we could record this and you can watch it on YouTube. Oh.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. All right. See you.
All right. Moving on to Guy's question from Seattle. Are there any other parts of the world experiencing better success with their distance learning model? So does anybody have context? John, what are you hearing from your friends?
Well, the word better is the question, but are other parts of the world? Zoom is in, I think, 146 countries, and they have over 100,000 people attend their summer conference, and it's literally from all over the world. I think what's interesting is different countries have very different educational systems. Some are more centrally controlled, so you're seeing the advantages of having something centrally controlled. You're seeing here in the United States everything, because the country as large as we are, everyone's doing everything differently. I think there's an attempt now in the academic community to start documenting these. The United Nations has an educational group that had been holding yearly conferences on technology and education, and they're beginning to gather data. So I think this is the right time for us to really look at the different models and start assessing how they're working. I think we're seeing some countries that are not having the learning loss that we appear to be experiencing here in the US, but they may not have been having the gains that we have in our educational system.
I wondered if is there a lot of siloed administration that's just not using and looking out for best practices, or is that happening a lot? What does anybody here think? Do you see it? I'm seeing vague. Okay, well,
I'll say for higher ed and the CSU system, they really are attempting to find out what's working and what's not working. There was a resistance or a hope, and Roscoe, you can tell me what. We're three different countries. We're Northern California, Central California, and Southern California. So when I talk to Roscoe, I'm going, how is it in your country? The CSU is a loose system of campuses that fight against each other. But I think there's a real attempt of the campuses figuring out and how to solve problems. So there's a group in the CSU, and Michael may have the same thing in the UC, but in CSU, of the academic technology support officers or staff. And they were usually small groups that worked with the faculty of the willing. And that's been a major change with our faculty support. They were now working with all the faculty. And that's had to change how they, and they had fewer staff serving, rather than 15% of the campus, they were serving 100% of the campus. So there's a lot of sharing going on, but education does not move quickly, and it moves in cycles. Once, we used to joke that once you got all excited for the fall, by the time it was spring, it was downhill until you got excited till the next fall. And there are two big chunks, the fall semester and the spring semester. So we're seeing a lot of resetting. I'm with this faculty support group, a lot of resetting for the spring of what they were doing in the fall, which they thought they were only going to have to do in the fall. Now we're resetting for the spring, and now people are less sure of what things are going to be like in the fall and are really trying to analyze it. And I'll release some time to Michael for the other campus system in the California.
Michael, weigh in, and then Greg will take us to Norway for some more international perspective.
Yeah, I think that what John said is true, and there are similar groups in the UC system, which is also a group of campuses that are competitive with each other in various ways. But to the point about best practices, I think it's also largely what Aaron has said a few times, which is in the past you would have sort of a lot of pulling teeth and herding cats to get people to try things that are new. And now that people have been forced into this world to some extent, there is, a sort of, where possible, at least sort of a baseline level of comfort. And once you've got that, I think everyone is really interested in trying to do the right thing. It's just a matter of how much spare mental capacity and energy do you really have, either as an individual or as an administrator, just trying to keep the lights on, or the virtual lights on at least. Maybe you don't need them on campus anymore. But, to just push that forward. And, I think that's been the biggest challenge, is just there's so much still changing day to day, especially when you have people that are resistant to committing to a plan that can impede best practices. Otherwise, I'd say the people that I do know internationally, there are differences in administration and online education norms. I think the biggest difference is the people who are handling it better tend to be in places where they've just handled the pandemic better. And what that actually means is a little bit less online education in some senses, but an overall more effective, virus management plan has just led to an easier situation for everyone. So
am I hearing that this much disruption globally has given people permission a little to change, and it's just forced them to say, I've got to rethink some things?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Greg?
Well, I think to a large extent, you have to look at how administrations have made decisions. And if they've consciously decided that, for instance, Cambridge, they decided way back in March 2020 that all of this year was going to be online, period. Okay, so now they've had, by now, they should have a very deep understanding of of how to structure these things, the tools to use. I think when you're in an on again, off again, on again, off again situation, you can't really evaluate any of the tools because you're not doing it for that long. And it's oh, I'm hybrid this week. Oh, I got to go. I'm supposed to go in next week. Oh no, wait, we had a couple new cases. I'm home. I'm home next week. You know what I mean? And it's quite disruptive. So I think that we can get, and European countries have made decisions quite more decisively, I believe, than U.S.
But I think, Greg, I think the question that you're addressing is how are decisions made in the university, and there's an assumption of faculty that we actually make the decisions for curriculum and teaching. We approve courses, mode and load, and the administration's job is to support us. And the flip here, well, it doesn't work that way all the time.
No, right.
But I am hearing that there's value in commitment. Whatever you're going to do, just do it, get everybody on board. And then if you see something falling apart, that structure's collapsing, you will have to change, but at least commit to the change if you're going to make it. Great. Chris Clark?
I'm reminded of the myth about the final days of the initial voyage of Christopher Columbus and his 3 ships. Columbus is pictured as the sail on person, and the crew is getting nervous about falling off the edge of the earth or encountering the sea monsters that were artfully depicted on these made-up charts. And attribution is that sailing on and sticking with that was the secret of success of that voyage, that they actually did find land. Of course, it's a myth, but it's a guiding myth in a way that staying the course literally is going to help the whole organization, or they'll fall off the edge of the earth.
It may be a myth, but I still carry in my brain, there be monsters here. Let's move on to Dan Huber of Erie, Pennsylvania. If educators were not aware that you can use live transcription in Zoom to be used like closed captioning, maybe it can be discussed and showed off. Does anybody have one of those live captioning things? Michael Ball, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so it's been a thing that Zoom has been increasingly enabling for educational institutions. So if you don't have it in its sort of account level setting, talk to your school's administration staff, and they can probably get enabled. It's been sort of rolling out. I've been using it recently just as a backup for things. But one of the things that's really nice is it gives you 2 modes. It gives you closed caption style as the meeting is going. It also gives you the option to open a sidebar, which has the running transcript, and at the end of a meeting you can just click save transcript. So the thing that I find super helpful is if you've ever used the app otter.ai, which is a similar live transcription app. Reportedly that's the same actual backend as Zoom, although I'm not sure if that's confirmed. But the best thing is just having a meeting with someone and being able to pull that transcript out. And I find that this is a lot more usable than an audio recording or a video recording if I want to refer to something later. But the really nice thing is when it's on your Zoom account, you have one button, you can enable it, and it just works. Everyone else in the meeting has their own personal control whether or not to show it. Not as accurate as a human transcriptionist. So if you have students or others who need direct interpretation, I would focus on getting a dedicated support person in there to make that quality what you'd need, but it's very effective for what it is.
Kent and John. Kent, go.
Yeah, we've been using one called Descript, or one called rev.com, which does a similar thing. And I've been using Descript, which is, it's just been amazing. What it's able to do is, like, if you download a video, it will give you a full transcription. It even recognizes if there are different people talking, and you can identify the different people. And so every time I show a video, I also upload the full transcript of that video. And then you can also put custom closed captions in that video itself. And so I have found Descript to be an absolutely amazing tool for all of that. So anything I show has a full transcript along with it that students can go and refer to later.
Okay, John Edelson, and then we'll move along because we got a lot of questions.
Well, I mentioned Descript is pretty amazing, but the Zoom transcript feature and the full transcript, which actually indicates who's speaking, is really great for the little faculty group I work with. The faculty members, before it was as good as it was now, they weren't putting on the system, but they were making recordings of their own lectures, used it to review their lectures. And a number of our faculty are sort of amazed at what they actually said. You know, sort of when I had a dictation and it would come back beautiful, and then I changed the person who was doing my dictation, it came back horrible. And the difference was the person doing the transcription fixed it for me. So these faculty members were saying, did I really say that?
Okay, we're going to do this pretty quick. Earl Negrete of Westlake Village says he's getting traction on the idea of using Mukana for cleaning up class discussions for clarity and pace of discussion for the time allotted to the teachers. Any ideas on a release date? No, that has not been officially done. I will say that, and we can't say much about it because I don't know how far I can go, but I will just say that it is continuing. It is getting closer and closer. In fact, there may be somebody watching me in the first stages of kind of little training things, but you know, it's moving along. It is coming and it's moving along, and that's enough. We're not moving farther than that. We're going along to Robin Monkvold of Steiger, Norway, up there with Greg. Does anyone have any experience using online conference software like Gather.town or Gatherly.io? Michael.
Yeah, so I think in terms of Gather.town, I would put it in the group of just really online meeting spaces that are not always, it could be for anything. I will say personally about Gather.town, I don't know if Gatherly.io is similar or not, but I think that there's a lot to be said for trying to mimic some of the physical interactions. But my big problem with Gather itself, they've made a lot of improvements lately, which is good, but you're adding a mechanism like arrow key navigation to a virtual space, and it really requires you to be, I think, familiar with something like the mechanics of video game play. And while there are a lot of people who are comfortable moving around in a video game, there are many people who are not comfortable with this. And so there's a pretty high learning curve. The other thing that Gather falls into as a potential trap is, in a lot of cases, they do this proximity effect where if you're near a group, you can hear them. And if you're not near a group, you can't hear them. And this kind of mimics, the natural way that you can be in and out of a conversation. But the digital form is very binary. You're either in the group or you're not in the group. And in real life, it's not, your brain and ears do a whole bunch of processing so that you can, sort of tune your focus. And so I think for a lot of people, there's potentially jarring experiences. On the other hand, if you spend the time designing your own space, there is sort of a level of whimsy and fun that you can bring to a meeting. But I think you just have to allocate the time to really make sure that people are comfortable with the environment, that you're using some of those features, that you train them on, what's going on there. And so I'm a little bit less pessimistic about it than I used to be. But to me personally, I think there's something easy about a Zoom meeting. There are other tools that I've tried and liked. Some of them are in beta. One you could check out is called Oyay, OHYAY.co. Is a similar idea of some virtual meeting spaces, but less video game focused. And it really just depends on your group and what you need.
Okay, moving on to Brody Hafner of New York City, who says, I make slide presentations that use historical photographs and maps and so forth to virtual high school classrooms where all students are remote. What are pacing considerations? Ideally, how frequently should I stop for questions and discussion? So, Kent, go ahead.
I think this goes back to using asynchronous and synchronous. I always think of use asynchronous for information and synchronous for collaboration. And if you're presenting and you're kind of waiting for feedback and you're not getting it, then that's going to interrupt your flow. And so, I mean, this is sort of a bigger picture than just one thing, but I would look into, if you have a presentation, record, I mean, Alex says this, you record that, you make it dense as possible, have the students watch it at their own time, and then have them ask questions later, you know, then you meet to collaborate on what the information was. And so, yeah, that would be my suggestion, is see if you could make it asynchronous, record it, have them watch it on their own, and then discuss it later, not in the middle of the presentation.
Roscoe and then Michael. Go, Roscoe.
I was just going to say, is this just one high school classroom at a time? Then I think you could have a lot more back and forth. But if you're talking 3 or 4 classrooms all at the same time, it gets pretty hard to stop and be interactive.
Yeah, but if they're watching it afterwards, I always like that. I'm going shorter with my materials when I'm doing something like that, because I know if it's designed to be watched on another service later, people can pause and return and go back and refresh their memory. They don't have to do it in real time. So that's just a difference about how I see it. Michael, did you have your hand up on that?
I think it's a question of, if you're taking a topic that you've traditionally made a lecture on and trying to convert it to online, I would agree that, you know, there's a good place for the asynchronous piece of this. The other thing that I'd say, though, is you don't have to do it all at once. If you're in a place like Zoom, I really think that you leverage the chat of what's going on and encourage students to have a discussion either themselves or ask you questions. And one of the things that I like doing when I am giving more lecture style content over Zoom is I don't necessarily read the chat real time, because it is pretty hard to speak in an expository manner while also accurately reading comments. It is a skill that you can kind of learn, but what does give me feedback is the speed of the sort of chat going by when I have a large enough course. And I think it's also okay to then tell students, like, hey, we've had a lot of discussion. I'm going to take 30 seconds and catch up on the chat. And for them, it's a good time for them to, you know, just take a mental break, look away from the screen or something. And then I go and address those questions. I will also, you know, in the same way that students can raise a hand in a lecture, they can raise their Zoom hand in, you know, 1 or 2 forms. And that's also a cue for me that, you know, there's other questions. And so, you know, do that. But in general with a lecture, just the more places that you can pause and solicit feedback, you don't always have to wait for it to happen, but the more comfortable that students will get providing it to you.
Emily?
I was just going to make this suggestion. I was working with some high school history and social studies classes, and we used Jamboard. So you put those maps or historical pictures onto a Jamboard, and the kids can throw questions on Post-it notes, or they can annotate it. You can make a copy for each student, or you can make small groups, or you can make the whole class. It is limited to the number of users that can edit at the same time. And if that's the problem, like you have too many kids, looking at enabling view with comment, so the students can view the presentation and then leave comments. So either ahead of time or during the discussion on the actual slide. So if they have a question about something going on in the background of a picture, or they notice something with a keen eye, they can throw a comment up on there, and then people can reply in line on the discussion. And I believe that works on both Microsoft PowerPoint and on Google Slides. I know it works on Google Slides. PowerPoint, I go back and forth with a lot, depending on because they have so many different versions versus the online version versus the full paid version. But allowing the students to interact with those images prior to class and leaving comments, and then discussing it in class in a more context way, and then addressing some of those comments that the kids pasted on, I think is highly interactive and keeps those kids engaged, because they want to see people responding to what they said. They want to see their question getting answered. And so at that high school level, 9-12, you're definitely pacing wise, it takes a while to get used to. You could put one thing up and the kids are totally into it. And then the next day you put something you think is exactly the same engagement level, and it's like crickets and a black wall of no cameras turned on, and it's crazy. But yeah, just riding it and figuring it out, but using something that allows students to engage with the slides, I think is much more engaging to the students overall than, just talking to the slides.
Okay, I'm confused because I hang on a second. It has to do with the question about flash. And have I gone there? Did I mess it up somehow and get out of conjunction here?
I can repeat it.
It's a question from Kara. No, I've got it in front of me now.
Okay.
Does anyone have a good converter software for converting SWF flash files into video files? Just use a screen capture program. I guess Flash is now officially totally and completely dead.
Yeah, and so of course we have people who didn't see all of those warnings. And now we're like, help, help, help.
Well, screen scraping, I mean, just if you can run the Flash files, you can do screen captures. I know QuickTime, and there are other things, things like Screencast, that will do great quality screen grabbing. But Michael Ball, do you have any tools directly?
Yeah, I believe the application Handbrake, that's Brake, BRAKE, is a very popular video encoding application that was originally came out of this sort of ripping DVD space. I'm pretty sure that it can encode Flash video files into another format. There is another really popular but pretty complicated tool called FFmpeg. And this is one of those sort of Swiss Army knife of video encoding utilities. There's definitely a way to do it to convert Flash files in FFmpeg, but FFmpeg is one of those programs that takes a bit of getting used to. It's was traditionally a command line tool. There are some front ends, so you don't need to necessarily know the command line, but they're all a little bit complicated to use. So I would reach for Handbrake first, and if that doesn't give you the options, potentially try something else too.
John Edelson?
There are some services that will convert Flash to HTML5. So it's just depending on how much of the Flash you want to keep. We're getting ready to do that because we do have some people who thought it would never go away, like the Tooth Fairy.
Well, it was there for a long time, sadly. Let's move on. Rachel Ann Clifton, how has the Parent Teachers Association and traditional fundraisers held? How have they held throughout a school year, and how did they thrive in these past many months? Has anybody been talking to APT, PTAs and figuring out how they do their normal helpful work? John Edelson?
It's not my gig that I did, but Michael Slade, who is a co-worker with me, for his school, they had their normal spring festival, which was normally supposed to be a fundraiser. They decided to hold a virtual spring festival and not have it be a fundraiser, and doing similar events. And then they decided to put a few calls for funding during the spring festival they did on Zoom, and they doubled the amount of money they had received from any face-to-face. So they're going to do all their festivals now this way because more people were able to attend it than ever made it to the physical event. And if we wanted to, Mike did a really nice presentation on how he did that presentation, because he had teachers making presentations, students doing performances. They had alumni.
Nice.
They had older brothers talking about younger sisters who, older brother had graduated, the younger sister in school, and they talked about that transition from school to their college, and it was probably one of the best events they ever did. So I think you're going to see a lot of these organizations doing more virtual activity.
Well, that community involvement, particularly on the elementary school level and above, that's really a bonding thing for parents. It's always been for me as my son was growing up. And now that so many teachers and so many parents, there are these things, the technology of a headset and things like that, where a lot of communities could use help financial and things like that. So I hope they manage to make that turn, and that the PTAs, APTs, whichever you use, successfully get this together. Cara, go ahead.
Yeah, we attended a pretty cool fundraiser. It was actually for the orthotics and prosthetics community. And what they were doing is actually putting it to real life examples of case studies of, for example, someone donated $150 and was able to give this patient this product. And then they said, so our goal today is to get 5 more patients. And they put, some pictures up there of these 5 patients are waiting for their product and blah, blah, blah. And so sure enough, like people were just like, yeah, like I want to be one of those 5 people that helps that one patient. And it was really, really successful. So putting it into context of like real life examples of this donation of even $20 can do this for this many students, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Cool. Earl Negretti's in next with for Kent Kersey. At Kent Kersey. Wondering your opinion on collaboration software for the remote band class. Any opinion on Cyborg Llama or Acapella? Kent, go ahead.
I'll probably refer that to Roscoe because I think he would know more about that. But I would say, because I don't teach music, but the collaboration, one of the tools that I've used this week that was really great is Poll Everywhere. I don't know if any of you have used that much, but it's great because it has like word clouds that generate in real time. And so I had the students looking at certain definitions, what's the most important thing, and you're just watching this word cloud explode in front of you. And also Padlets, and I think Emily mentioned that a few times. It's great too because it's real-time collaboration. You can have all the groups working and you're just watching this be generated in front of you, which is great because students don't want to ask questions, but they're willing to put in suggestions on how to keep the discussion going further, what's the most important idea here, there, or somewhere else. And so I refer the rest of my time from the gentleman from Brea, California.
I'll go real quick.
Jared recognizes Roscoe.
Thank you, Bill. I would pass this right to Jeff Francis, and I will quote him. He says, "Analog is awesome. Latency is 0." So sadly, there hasn't been a software that's really worked well to try and combine groups to play at the same time. It's just the latency kills it.
You might also want to go to regular office hours and just pop in there. And if you see Victor Cajallo there, Victor has kind of like been our music guru. He's a saxophonist who has been just diving deeply into everything having to do with online performance and sharing everything that he's learning. And he is becoming a walking encyclopedia of latencies and all these new technologies that come out and which ones work better or less well for live individual performance, and then by extension live ensemble performance, which I think is the holy grail that nobody seems to have quite cracked yet. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I was just going to throw this back real quick. And Lauren Strobe, if you guys are doing any fundraisers, he's been doing some amazing work for a private high school in Palos Verdes, and he's available and really does some nice work, but also very knowledgeable in this area.
Yeah, both of them are probably in our Discord. Great folks. We're moving on to Emily Russo's question from Red Hook. In the subject of live streaming, student media team needs to be able to stream sporting events from their school iPads, both home and on the road. The school does not allow YouTube Live. Any suggestions? And Emily's note is they don't necessarily want to carry a laptop with them to get the stream started, and they don't have Surface tablets or anything easy like that, nor do they want to use a Zoom room. John Edelson, go ahead.
I put a link in the chat for a software called Cinemaker, and Cinemaker lets you take an iPad and use 4 iPhones as the camera, also audio chats, and it has the ability to stream directly out of it to a number of services. So not only is it easy to stream out of, but it's also a pretty robust production tool using tools that students have, an iPad and 4 iPhones, and you got a 4-camera multi-studio, lower thirds, etc.
Cool. Michael Ball.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the app because they recently renamed it. Teradek has an app called AirMix Solo. It is a free app with some in-app purchases. The in-app purchases are on the order of $5 to $10, but that lets you specify. It has hooks for the default streaming services, but it lets you just put in a URL for any additional streaming service that you have. I'm not sure when you say YouTube Live is blocked, if that's on just the sending end, or if the viewers also can't use YouTube Live. If you can use YouTube Live in one place, or if that's sort of an acceptable viewing platform, one thing that works sometimes is to use a tool like Restream to stream to Restream, which might not be blocked, and then Restream handles the distribution then to YouTube or elsewhere. And the nice thing is, as long as you can get that URL for Restream into your app, which most of the streaming apps will let you just put in the stream URL, that would let you distribute it. The other thing that is worth looking at, depending on who you're working with, is whether or not any of the LMSs that you have sort of set up, have something potentially like a Panopto or a Kaltura integration or a few others that through, none of these will be quite as nice as YouTube, but at least through those integrations have a live stream option that can be turned on. Usually they're off by default, but many of the video services that a school might use have that option buried somewhere in the platform. I don't know if that will scale to your needs, but it might be worth a shot.
Moving along to the, oh no, Guy is here. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one more is just Switcher Studio. It's along the same lines of what Michael and John had recommended. It's just one of the more popular ones, and it even does things like remote controls heads that are on DJI Osmo gimbal. So there's some pretty neat stuff out there. That one's like $49 a month, but it's probably the most popular iPad switching app.
It would be fun to do a second hour seeing all three of them: Cinemaker, Switcher Studio, and Live Air. They're different flavors, and everyone, it would probably be like the OS wars, but it'd be fun to really dive into them.
I think it'd be a really fun second hour. Tony Mobley, you had a comment?
John, please put that in Discord. That's a great request.
I
will
also
do that.
wanted you to consider FilmMaker Pro as well.
Oh, FilmIC Pro?
FilmIC Pro, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. FilmIC Pro does it. I'm not sure it does multiple like that, but it's certainly one of the best tools for turning an iOS device, at least, into a clear feed that you can send into other things and put stuff over top of if you are interested in incorporating into other content. Okay, looks like we're down to our last one for the morning, and that comes from Nick Gutfund of Bedford, New York. Any chance of making a Discord link available for this session? Many educators can't make the weekly window to pick it up, or an educator link that I can share with a nonprofit with whom I consult. And Roscoe was going to tell you about that.
Alex did put one in late in the game. I think it was at 8:24 if you can scroll all the way back through Mukana, but it may be extinct by now.
Yeah, and for the Discord link, every morning it gets posted, but it's in a narrow window, and this is by Alex's design. So if you come the hour before, right as we're starting the mic checks, which typically happens about 8:40 to 8:43, the Discord link will be posted. You just need to come in once. Once you sign up for Discord, you're in for the rest of your office hours experience. So you could do that tomorrow morning. We will be here on Sunday, and we do the same thing Sunday as we do every other day. So you can get into the Discord for office hours.
6:43 Pacific.
Right, 6:40 to 6:43 Pacific Central Time. Pacific Standard Time.
But for any teachers,
Pacific Eastern Time. Make a choice.
He does add one for teachers on Saturdays. So,
okay, yeah. So there will be a Discord that'll come in for Saturday. And is that it? I think we pretty much covered it.
I just wanted to say, Bill, that once they sign in and sign up, that they're good, and so they don't have to worry about doing it again.
Right. And the Discord community goes 24/7. So it's a great place to do a version of what we do here. It's in text rather than live. But boy, the archive there has grown. There are tremendous resources, and there is an education subtopic in the Discord. So if people want to gather there, and maybe one of the great things is using that in combination with the archive of chats that we've had in the past. You can often go back and reference education topics that we might have covered before, because there's usually a day specific. So if you kind of parse those dates, for quite a while we did education on Friday, and then as the school year got going, we moved it to Saturday so that more teachers could participate. So look on Fridays and Saturdays. You may find a lot of great content from some of the people you're seeing right here. I think that takes care of everything. So thank you all for coming today. We appreciate always having our educators here. You guys are doing important work for our whole society, and we
Bill,
really
is there an
appreciate it.
after hours today or not?
I have not heard one way or another. So I would say try the normal link. For those of you, there's an after show link that's been live for quite a while. And I don't know if somebody can get a hold of that and post it into Discord, but that usually goes for an hour, sometimes more after the show.
I'd like
But
to,
I haven't been
I'd like to
told
say thank you in a way that if we survived 2020, the word for me, because of you and the forward thinking and the evaluative processes that you are going through and sharing with us, I think for me at least, the word thrive in 2021. And it's on a big part, I credit you for that attitude. So as Kara points out, attitude is at least 98% of anything change. You're a part of my change. So thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
all.
and I just want to say before we leave today that I think tomorrow is show 300. It's pretty
celebration
amazing.
of the celebration
the
of the show.
celebration of it. I think maybe Monday is actually, whatever it is, regardless, the fact that we've sustained this community, so many people have contributed to this. And so I'm really looking forward to looking back a little bit. This has been an amazing thing to be part of. And Roscoe, go ahead.
Sky, just so you know, in education, thrive is thrashed but alive. Thrive.
All right. On that lovely note, with smiles on
happy
everybody's
note?
faces, we
Thank
will
you.
see
I was
you
trying
for
to be positive.
education
Come on, Roscoe, work with me
next
here.
Saturday.
Okay.
And for right now, God bless y'all. Take care and have a great evening.
Hitting end stream.